The third book of the heroic acts and sayings of the good Pantagruel, composed by Francois Rabelais, Doctor of Medicine. Revised and corrected by the author to comply with former criticisms. The aforesaid author beseeches his kindly readers to preserve their laughter till the 78th book. Francois Rabelais, to the spirit of the Queen of Navarre. Abstracted soul, ravished in ecstasy, return now to thy home, the firmament, leaving thy body formed in harmony, thy host and servant, once obedient, to thy commands in this life transient. Wouldst thou not care to quit, just fleetingly, thy heavenly mansion and perpetual, and here below for the third time to see the jovial deeds of good Pantagruel? The author's prologue. Monsieur Francois Rabelais, to the third book of the heroic deeds and sayings of the good Pantagruel. Good people, most illustrious boozers, and you thrice precious and gouty sirs, did you ever see Diogenes, the cynic philosopher? If you did see him, then your vision was as keen as ever, or I am devoid of all intelligence and logic. It is a fine sight to see the glint of wine and twinkling gold, of the sun, I mean. I call the man born blind as my witness, the renowned figure in Holy Scripture who, when Almighty God, whose words are instantaneously transformed into deeds, gave him the choice of any wish in the world, asked only for the gift of sight. Now you are not young, so you are equipped to philosophize vinously and not vainly, and therefore metaphysically, and so to be raised at once in the Bacchic council, where by tasting you may test the substance, color, odor, excellence, eminence, property, faculty, virtues, effect, and value of the said blessed and coveted liquor. If you have not seen Diogenes, and I should not take much persuading that you have not, you have at least heard some talk of him, for the whole sky and the air have rung with his fame, and his name has remained memorable and famous till this day. Besides, you are all descended from the blood of Phrygia, or I am much mistaken, and if you have not as many crowns as Midas had, you have something else which he had, something which the ancient Persians valued most highly in their spies, and which the Emperor Antonius required his servants to possess, a something from which the basilisk of Rohan in after times derived its surname of fine ears. If you have never heard of Diogenes, I will tell you a story about him presently, while we start on the wine. Drink up, my boys, and I start my argument. Now listen to me, but first let me inform you, in case, in your simplicity, you are deceived, like so many infidels, that in his day he was a rare philosopher, and the most cheerful among 1,000. If he had certain imperfections, so have you, so have we all, but none but God is perfect. Nevertheless, Alexander the Great, though he had Aristotle for his tutor and servant, held him in such esteem that if he had not been Alexander, he would have wished to be Diogenes of Sinope. When Philip, king of Macedon, undertook the siege and destruction of Corinth, the Corinthians were warned by their spies of the grand array and the huge forces that he was leading against them. So they were all, not unreasonably, afraid and neglected no precautions. Each man scrupulously performed his tasks and duties in the hopes of beating off his hostile attack and protecting the city. Some brought movables, cattle, corn, wine, fruit, victuals, and all necessary supplies out of the fields and into the fortress. Others repaired the walls, erected bastions, squared ravelins, dug ditches, repaired countermines, improvised parapets, constructed platforms, emptied gun pits, repaired outer ramparts, built lookout points, redug counterscarps, cemented curtain walls, set up sniping posts, sloped parapets, mortised barbicans, strengthened battlements, fitted fresh claims to the portcullises, both Greek and Saracenic, posted sentries, and sent out patrols. Everyone was on the watch. Everyone took his part. Some polished corselets, varnished back, then breastplates, clean housings, front stalls, habergeons, jackets of mail, sallets, beavers, knights' headpieces, double pikes, closed helmets, morions, coats of mail, chain armor, arm pieces, thigh pieces, gussets, gorgets, arm and thigh plates, breast pieces, scale armor, hauberks, shields, bucklers, leggings, greaves, foot pieces, and spurs. Others prepared bows, slings, arbalèsts, slingshots, catapults, fire arrows, grenades, fire pots, balls and brands, ballistas, scorpions, and other hideous engines of war, calculated to destroy the enemy's siege towers. They sharpened scythes, pikes, claws, halberds, brown bills, long hooks, lances, Turkish spears, tridents, partisans, clubs, battle axes, darts, dartlets, javelins, great javelins, and boar spears. They put an edge on scimitars, cutlasses, curved blades, spears, sabers, short swords, tucks, stilettos, stabbing swords, daggers, mandusians, poniards, knives, blades, and barbs. Every man practiced with his weapon. Every man scoured the rust from his hanger. Even the oldest and most prudish of the women furbished up her harness. For, as you know, Corinthian women of old had plenty of courage in battle. Now when Diogenes saw them all so warm at work and himself assigned no duties by the magistrates, he watched their behavior for some days in complete silence. Then, as if spurred by the martial spirit, he slung his cloak across his chest, rolled his sleeves up to his elbows, trussed himself up like an apple gatherer, handed his wallet to an old comrade of his, together with his books and double-sided scrolls, and made off out of the town towards Cranium, which is a jutting hill not far from Corinth, and a fine lookout place. Thither he rolled his earthen tub, which served him as a shelter against the inclemencies of the weather, and putting out all his strength in a tremendous outburst of spirits, he twirled it, whirled it, scrambled it, bungled it, frisked it, jumbled it, tumbled it, wheedled it, scratched it, stroked it, churned it, beat it, bumped it, banged it, battered it, upended it, tempered it, tapped it, stamped it, stomped it, unstopped it, shifted it, shook it, thumped it, pummeled it, waggled it, hurled it, teased it, staggered it, tottered it, raised it, rinsed it, nailed it, tethered it, veered it, steered it, stuffed it, bustled it, lifted it, soiled it, tackled it, shackled it, mocked it, spiked it, patted it, plated it, fondled it, fumbled it, dashed it, splashed it, crashed it, slashed it, planed it, charmed it, armed it, speared it, harnessed it, pennoned it, caparisoned it, rolled it from top to bottom of the hill, and precipitated it from the Cranium. Then he rolled it uphill again, as Sisyphus did his stone, so violently that he almost knocked the bottom out of it. At the sight of this activity, one of his friends asked him what moved him thus to torment his body, his spirit, and his tub, to which the philosopher replied that, not being entrusted with any other duties by the state, he was giving his tub a thrashing in order not to seem one lazy idler among a people so feverishly busy. In the same way, although I have nothing to fear, I am still not unperturbed at finding myself counted unworthy of employment, whereas throughout the whole of this most noble kingdom of France, on both sides of the Alps, I see every one today busily and earnestly working, some at the fortification and defense of their country, some in repelling the enemy, and some in attacking them, and all this under such excellent direction, so admirably ordered, and with such a clear view to future advantages, for the frontiers of France will soon be magnificently extended, and our people will rest in peace and security. I can almost subscribe, therefore, to the opinion of the excellent Heraclitus, to the effect that war is the father of all good things. Indeed, I believe that war is called bellum, a fine thing in Latin, not out of antithesis, as certain botchers of old Latin tags have believed, because they saw but little beauty in war, but positively and literally, because in war every kind of beauty and virtue shines out. Every kind of evil and ugliness is abolished. I will give you another proof. That wise and pacific King Solomon knew no better way of expressing the ineffable perfection of divine wisdom than by comparing it to an army with banners. I have been considered too weak and impotent to be enrolled in our country's attacking force, and have not been employed by its other defensive army, even as a carrier of hods, a bender of rods, or a cutter of sods. I should not have cared which, but I have felt it to be most disgraceful to stand idly watching all these valorous, eloquent, and warlike persons who are performing their noble interlude and tragicomedy before the watching eyes of all Europe. I have been ashamed not to exert myself, not to contribute that nothing, which is all that I have left, my all, for I think that little glory accrues to those who employ their eyes in this exploit, but are sparing of their strength, conceal their crowns, and hide their small change, scratch their heads with one finger like bored sluggards, gape at flies like the persons' calves, prick up their ears like asses in Arcady, to the tune of the music, and silently show by their countenances that they approve of the performance. Having made my choice, having made up my mind, I decided that I should perform no useless or tiresome role if I were to tumble my diogenic tub, which is all that is left to me from the shipwreck of my past, in the straits of misfortune. Now, how do you advise me to sit about my tub rumbling? By the Virgin who ups her skirts, I do not yet know. Wait a little, till I've swallowed a draught from this bottle. It is my true and only Helicon, my one Pegasus spring, my sole enthusiasm. As I drink I hear deliberate, discourse, resolve, and conclude. After the epilogue I laugh, write, compose, and drink again. Ennius wrote as he drank as he wrote. Aeschylus, if he put any trust in Plutarch's Symposiacs, used to drink as he composed, to compose as he drank. Homer never wrote on an empty stomach. Cato never wrote except for after drinking. So do not say that I am not following the example of good and praiseworthy men. It is fine, fresh stuff, as you might say, entering into its second or rarefied state. God, the good Lord Sabaoth, that is to say, the Lord of hosts, be eternally praised for it. So if at the same time the rest of you will take one large or two little gulps under your hoods, I can see no objection, providing that you give God a pinch of thanks for it. So since this is my lot, or my destiny, or it is not granted to everyone to go and live in Corinth, I am resolved to serve both attackers and defenders, for I will not stand by as a useless idler among the diggers, pioneers, and engineers. I will do what Neptune and Apollo did under Laomedon in Troy, what Renaud of Montauban did on his latter days. I will help the masons, I will set the pots boiling for them, and when the meal is finished, I will measure the musings of the bemused with the music of my little pipe. Even so did Amphion found, build, and complete the great and celebrated city of Thebes to the sound of his lyre. For the benefit of the warriors, I am about to rebroach my cask, the contents of which you would have sufficiently appreciated from my 2 earlier volumes if they had not been adulterated and spoiled by dishonest printers. I am about to draw for them, out of the product of our after-dinner entertainment, a gallant third draft, and later a jovial fourth of Pantagrueling sentences. You have license for me to call them diegenical. So though I cannot be their companion in arms, they shall have me as their faithful steward, cheering them to the best of my small powers on their return from the fray, and as the eulogist, the indefatigable eulogist, of their brave and glorious feat of arms, I shall not fail in this. By God's flower of patience, unless Mars fails in Lent, and he will take good care not to do that, the lecher. At this point I remember reading how one day Ptolemy, the son of Lagus, in the crowded theater, among other spoils and booty from his conquests, presented the Egyptians with a completely black Bactrian camel, and a slave party-colored in such a way that one portion of his body was black and the other white. He was not, by the way, divided horizontally at the diaphragm, like that female votary of the Indian Venus, who was seen by the philosopher of Tyana somewhere between the Hydaspes and Mount Caucasus, but perpendicularly. Such phenomena had never yet been seen in Egypt, and Ptolemy hoped that by offering the people these rarities he would increase their love for himself. But what was the result? At the appearance of the camel they were all frightened and indignant. At the sight of the party-colored man, some mocked and others were shocked by what they considered a loathsome monster, created by an error of nature. In short, his hopes of pleasing his Egyptians, and in his way increasing their natural affection for him, slipped through his fingers. He discovered that they took more pleasure and delight in the handsome, the elegant, and the perfect than in ridiculous and monstrous objects. After this he had a very poor opinion of the slave and the camel, so poor indeed that soon afterward, owing to neglect and lack of common sustenance, they exchanged life for death. This example set me wavering between hope and fear, uncertain whether I may not meet with an unpleasant reception instead of the appreciation I expect, whether my treasure may not be coals, and I may not throw a blank instead of the double 6. Instead of doing them a service, I may offend them. Instead of amusing them, annoy them. Instead of pleasing them, displease them. Mine may be the fate of Eucleo's cock, so celebrated by Platus in his pot, by Ausonius in his Gryphus, and elsewhere. The creature discovered the treasure with his scratching, and had his throat cut for his pains. Would it not be distressing if that were to happen to me? Such a thing has happened before. It could easily happen again, but I swear by Hercules that it will not. For in every soldier I detect that specific trait, an individual quality, which our ancestors used to call Pantagruelism, which assures me that they will never take in bad part anything that they know to spring from a good, honest, and loyal heart. I have so often seen them take the will for the payment, and be content with it, when that was all the debtor had. With this point settled, I return to my cask. Up, lads, into the wine. Gulp it down, my boys, in brimming cups. Or, if you do not like it, leave it alone. I am not one of your tiresome Germans, who make their comrades drink, and what's worse, to carouse and trinque-alouse by brute force and violence. Every honest boozer, every decent gouty gentleman, every one who is dry, may come to this barrel of mine, but need drink only if they wish, and the wine is to the taste of their worshipful worships. Let them drink frankly, freely, and boldly, without stint or payment, such is my statute, and have no fear that the wine will give out, as it did at the marriage at Cana in Galilee. As much as you draw out at the tap, I will pour in at the bung. In this way the cask will remain inexhaustible, endowed with a living spring and a perpetual flow. So my liquor shall be like that within the cup of Tantalus, which the Brahmin sages represented figuratively, like the mountain of salt in Iberia, so celebrated by Cato, like the sacred golden bough, dedicated to the goddess of the underworld, so celebrated by Vigil. It is to a true cornucopia of ridicule and fun, and if at times it seems to you to be emptied to the lees, still it will not be dry. As in Pandora's jug, good hope lies at the bottom, not despair, as in Danaid's tub. Take one good note of what I have said, and of what manner of people I invite. For to avoid any deception, I will imitate Lucilius. He stated that he wrote only for his Tarentines and Calabrians, and I proclaim that I have broached my cask only for you sound fellows, drinkers of prime vintage and sufferers from gout in your own right. Those great legal bribe-mongers who rise with the mist to catch the early fee will find enough game in their brief bags, enough business in their own privies. Let them smell round it if they like. This is no booty for them. As for those high-hatted pettifoggers who are always on the lookout for mistakes, do not mention them to me, I beg of you, by the reference you bear to the 4 buttocks that engendered you and the life-giving peg which at the moment united them. As for the breed of pious hypocrites, do not speak to me of them either, though they are all outrageous drinkers, all scurvy and poxy, all possessed of an inexhaustible thirst and insatiable powers of mastication. And why not? Because they are not of good, but of evil, and of that evil from which we daily pray God to deliver us. Even though sometimes they pretend to be poor in spirit, never did an old ape make pretty faces. Down, curs, out of my way, out of my sunlight. Cowls to the devil with you. So you have come here, wagging your tails, to sniff at my wine and piss on my barrel, have you? See, here is the stick that Diogenes willed should be placed near him after his death, to drive off and break the backs of all such graveyard ghouls and Cerberian hellhounds. Get packing, you hypocrites. To your sheep, your dogs. Clear out of here, you canting cheats. To the devil with you. What, are you still there? I'll renounce my share in papamania, if I can get my teeth into you. Guzz, guzz, guzz. Off with you. Off with you. Are they not gone yet? May you never manage a shit without being lashed with stirrup leathers. May you never squeeze out a piddle without being strapadoed. And may your body never be warmed except by a good hiding. 1. How Pantagruel transported a colony of Utopians into Dipsodia. After having completely conquered the land of Dipsodia, Pantagruel transported there a colony of Utopians to the number of 9876543210 men, not counting the women and small children. These included artisans of all trades and professors of all the liberal sciences, and were intended to restore the people and cultivate and improve that country, which had till then been thinly inhabited and largely a desert. His principal reason for this colonization was not the overpopulation of Utopia, though the Utopians bred like rabbits. You know that well enough. There is no need to explain how their organs of reproduction were so fertile and their women's wombs so ample, greedy, retentive, and architecturally cellulated, that at the end of every ninth month 7 children, at the least, male and female, were born to each marriage, and in this they were like the children of Israel in Egypt. If Delira was not delirious when he wrote his commentary. Nor was his principal reason the fertility of the soil, the wholesomeness of the air, and the amenities of the land of Dipsodia. His purpose was simply to keep the Dipsodians to their duty and obedience by this importation of his ancient and loyal subjects, who from time immemorial had known, acknowledged, and owned no other lord, nor served any but him, who from the time of their birth and entry into this world had imbibed the sweetness and mildness of his rule with their mother's milk, and were reared and nourished in it. This gave him an assured hope that they would sooner renounce the life of the body than swerve from the exclusive and primitive obedience naturally due to their prince, never mind to what place they might be scattered or removed. It made him confident that not only would they and the successive generations born of their blood remain thus submissive, and that they would also keep the peoples newly joined to his empire similarly loyal and obedient. So indeed it turned out, and he was not at all disappointed in his plan, for if the Utopians had been loyal and dutiful before their transportation, the Dipsodes, after a few days of their society, were even more so, thanks to some kind of enthusiasm, common to all human beings at the beginning of enterprises which are to their liking. Their only complaint was, as they called all the heavens and guardians of the spheres to witness, that the good Pantagruel's renown had not come to their ears before. So here, my dear boozers, please take note that the way of preserving and retaining newly conquered countries is not, as has been the erroneous opinion of certain tyrannical spirits, to their own hurt and dishonor, to pillage, distress, torment, ruin, and persecute the people, ruling them with a rod of iron, in fact, to devour and consume them after the fashion of that wicked king whom Homer calls the demover, that is to say, devourer of his people. In this connection, I will not quote you examples from the ancient histories, but will merely remind you of what your fathers have seen, and yourselves too, if you are not too young. Newly conquered peoples have to be suckled, cradled, and dandled, like newborn children. Like freshly planted trees, they have to be propped, supported, and protected from all disasters, damages, and calamities. Like men recovering from long and severe illnesses and returning to convalescence, they must be indulged, pampered, and restored to life in this way. They will eventually be convinced that there is no king or prince in the world whom they would less desire to have for an enemy, whom they would rather have for a friend. Thus Osiris, the great king of the Egyptians, subdued the whole earth not so much by force of arms as by easing the peoples of their burdens, by instructing them in the good and healthy life, by suitable laws, by graciousness, and by favors. Therefore he was called by mankind the great king Euergetes, as to say the benefactor, this in fulfillment of Jupiter's prophecy given to a woman named Pamela. Indeed, Hesiod in his hierarchy places the good demons, call them angels or geniuses if you will, as mediators halfway between gods and men, superior to mankind but inferior to the gods, and because the riches and favors of heaven come to us from their hands, because they are continually doing us good and always preserving us from harm, he says that they are in the position of kings, since always to do good and never evil is an act exclusively royal. Just such another was that emperor of the universe, Alexander of Macedon. In just such a way did Hercules gain a possession of the whole continent, by relieving mankind of monsters, oppressions, exactions, and tyrannies, by governing them with kindness, by providing them with equity and justice, by instituting kindly government and law suitable to the condition of each country, by supplying men with what they lacked, by removing what was superfluous and pardoning all the past, with a perpetual oblivion for previous offenses. Another example is the Athenians' amnesty after the tyrants were exterminated by the prowess and energy of Thrasybulus. This was later cited by Cicero at Rome and imitated under the Emperor Aurelian. These are the love potions, charms, and incitements by which a man peacefully retains what he has painfully acquired. The conqueror cannot reign more happily, be he prince, king, prince, or philosopher, than by making justice second his valor. His valor has been shown in his victory and conquest. His justice will appear in his giving of laws, publishing of edicts, establishing of religions, and doing right to everyone. All this with the goodwill and affection of his people. As the noble poet Maro said of Octavian Caesar, the conqueror who won with the goodwill of those he conquered made his laws prevail. That is why Homer, in his Iliad, calls the good princes and great kings, as to say, adorners of the people. Such was the reflection of Numa Pompilius, second king of the Romans, as just politician and philosopher, when he ordained that nothing that had suffered death should be sacrificed to the god Terminus on the day of his festival, called the Terminales. By this he taught us in his own way that the boundaries, frontiers, and dependencies of kingdoms should be kept guarded in peace, amity, and gentleness, without the staining of hands and pillage and blood. Whoever acts otherwise will not only lose what he has gained, but also incur the disgraceful reputation of having acquired it by wicked and unjust means, since all that he has won has fallen to pieces in his hands. For ill-acquired gains split violently apart, and even if he has enjoyed the peaceful enjoyments of his conquests for the whole of his life, should they fall apart in the hands of his heirs, the same reproach will fall on him after his death. The ignominy of an unjust conqueror will hang about his money, for, as the common proverb runs, ill-gotten gains die with the grandson. Take note also, under this head, you who will enjoy gout by right of descent, how in this way Pantagruel made 2 angels out of 1, which is the opposite idea to Charlemagne's, who out of 1 devil made 2, when he transplanted the Saxons into Flanders, and the Flemish into Saxony. For being unable to keep the Saxons, whom he had added to his empire, in subjection, or to prevent their breaking into rebellion, at any such moment as he was drawn away into Spain, or some other distant territory, he transplanted them into his own country, which gave him natural obedience, into Flanders, that is, and transplanted the Hainaulters and Flemish, his natural subjects, into Saxony, not doubting their loyalty even when he settled in a strange land. But as it turned out, the Saxons maintained their rebellion and were as obstinate as ever, and the Flemish dwelling in Saxony imbibed the manners and aped the perversities of the Saxons. 2. How Panurge was made warden of Samalgundia in Dipsodia, and ate his wheat in the blade. In giving orders for the government of all Dipsodia, Pantagruel assigned the wardenship of Salmagundia to Panurge. This office was worth 678,910,6789 gold reals in fixed revenue, not counting the variable income from beetles and snails, which amounted, taking the good years with the bad, from 2,435,768 to 2,435,769 Agnus Dei crowns of France. On occasion, it amounted to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seraphs, when it was a good year for snails and beetles were in request. But that was not every year, and the new warden managed his affairs so well and prudently that in less than a fortnight he had squandered the whole income of his wardenship, both fixed and variable, for the next 3 years. He did not squander it, properly speaking, in such enterprises as founding monasteries, erecting churches, building colleges and hospitals, or throwing his bacon to the dogs, but he spent it on 1,000 little banquets and jolly feasts, open to all comers, especially to all who were good company, all young girls and pretty wenches, on felling his timber and burning the great trunks to sell the ashes, on taking money in advance, buying dear, selling cheap, and eating his wheat in the blade. When Pantagruel heard this news, he was not in any way indignant, angry, or perturbed, for, as I have already told you, and I tell you once more, he was the best little great good fellow that ever wore a sword. He took everything in good part, put favorable interpretation on every act, never tormented himself, and was never scandalized. Indeed, he would have strayed many miles from the divine palace of reason, if it had been in any way grieved or afflicted. For all the wealth that the sky covers and earth contains in all its dimensions, height, depth, length, and breadth, is not worth so much that we should upset our affections, or trouble our sense and spirits for it. He merely took Panurge aside and mildly pointed out to him that if he wished to live in this style, and not alter his way of housekeeping, it would be impossible, or at least very difficult, ever to make him rich. Rich? Replied Panurge. How do you set your heart on that? Did you really mean to make me rich in this world? Set your heart on a merry life, in the name of God and all good men. Don't allow any other care or thought into the sacrosanct domicile of your celestial brain. Never trouble its serenity with any clouds of thought, with their borders of pain and vexation. So long as you're alive and jolly, sprightly and merry, I shall be more than rich. All the world cries, "Thrift, thrift!" But some who talk of thrift know nothing at all about it. They ought to consult me. And now I should like to inform you that what you call a vice in me I have imitated from the University and High Court of Paris, places in which you will find the true source and living image of pantheology, and of all justice too. Anyone who doubts this, anyone who does not firmly believe it, is a heretic. Why, in one day they consume their bishop, or the revenue of his see, it's all one, for a whole year, even sometimes for 2. That is on the day of his installation, and he has no chance of avoiding it unless he wishes to be stoned on the spot. My behavior has also been based on the 4 cardinal virtues, on prudence, in taking money in advance, for one never knows who will die or kick the bucket. Who can tell whether the world will last another 3 years? And supposing it were to last longer, is any man such a fool as to dare promise himself 3 years of life? Man never found the deities so kindly as to assure him that he lived tomorrow. On justice commutative, in buying dear, I mean on credit, and selling cheap, that is, for cash. What does Cato say on this point in his book of husbandry? The father of a family, he says, must be a perpetual seller. In this way he will unfailingly become rich in the end, always supposing that his stock lasts. On justice distributive, by feasting good, note good, and charming companions, whom fortune has thrown like Ulysses on the rock of good appetite, without providing them with the victuals, and also good, note good, young wenches, note young, for according to the maxim of Hippocrates, youth is impatient of hunger, especially when it is vigorous, lively, brisk, stirring, and volatile. These wenches willingly and gladly give good men pleasure, and they are so Platonic and Ciceronian that they consider themselves born into this world not for themselves alone, but that their country may have one share of their persons, and their men friends another. On fortitude, in felling the great tree, like a second Milo, demolishing the dark forest, the haunts of wolves, wild boar and foxes, the dens of brigands and murderers, the lurking places of assassins, the workshops of forgers, the retreats of heretics, leveling them to make great clearings and pleasant heaths, playing old Harry with the timber, and preparing the seat for the eve of judgment. On temperance, by eating my wheat in the blade like a hermit, living on salads and roots, freeing myself from sensual appetites, and so saving something for the cripples and distressed. In doing this, I save the expense of hoers, who cost money, of reapers, who drink lustily and drink neat, of gleaners, who must have their cakes, of threshers, who, on the authority of Virgil's Thestilis, never leave garlic, onion, or shallot in the gardens, of millers, who are generally thieves, and of bakers, who are little better. Is that a small saving? Besides this, there is the damage done by the field mice, the wastage in the barns, and the destruction by mites and weevils. From wheat in the blade you make a fine green sauce, simple to mix and easy to digest, which rejoices the brain, exhilarates the animal spirits, delights the sight, induces the appetite, pleases the taste, fortifies the heart, tickles the tongue, clarifies the complexion, strengthens the muscles, tempers the blood, eases the diaphragm, refreshes the liver, unblocks the spleen, comforts the kidneys, relaxes the vertebrae, empties the ureters, dilates the spermatic glands, tautens the testicle strings, purges the bladder, swells the genitals, straightens the foreskin, hardens the bollock, and rectifies the member, giving you a good belly and good belching, farting, both noisy and silent, shitting, pissing, sneezing, crying, coughing, spitting, vomiting, yawning, snotting, breathing, inhaling, exhaling, snoring, sweating, and erections of the John Thomas, also countless other rare advantages. I understand perfectly, said Pantagruel. You mean to infer that mean-spirited persons have not the skill to spend much in a short time. You are not the original inventor of that heresy. Nero subscribed to it and admired his uncle Caius Caligula above all human beings for his marvelous ingenuity in spending in a few days the whole substance and patrimony left to him by Tiberius. But instead of keeping and observing the alimentary and sumptuary laws of the Romans, viz. the Lex Orcia, Fania, Didia, Licinia, Cornelia, Lepidana, and Antia, and that of the Corinthians, by which all men were rigorously forbidden to spend more in a year than the amount of their annual income. You have made the sacrifice of the road, which was to the Romans, but that of the paschal lamb was to the Jews. For it entailed eating all that was eatable, and throwing the rest in the fire, reserving nothing from the morrow. I can say this of you fairly, as Cato did of Albedius, who, after having most extravagantly eaten all that he possessed, until he had nothing left but a house, set fire to that, in order that he might truly say, consummatum est, which is what Thomas Aquinas said when he had eaten the whole of his lamprey. But let that pass. 3. Panurge's praise of debtors and borrowers. But, asked Pantagruel, when will you be out of debt? At the Greek kalends, replied Panurge, when all the world will be content, and you will be your own heir. God forbid that I should be debt-free, for then I shouldn't find anyone to lend me a penny. A man who leaves no leaven overnight will never raise dough in the morning. Always owe something to someone. Then there will be prayers continually offered up to God to grant you a long and happy life. Through fear of losing his money, your creditor will always speak well of you in all company. You will always gain new creditors for you, so that by borrowing from them you may pay him and fill his ditch with other men's soil. When, by the Druidical law of ancient Gaul, slaves, servants, and attendants were burned alive at the funerals of their lords and masters, had they not fine reason to fear the deaths of these same lords and masters, since they must needs die with them? Did they not continuously pray that great god Mercury, and Dis, the father of wealth, to preserve their health for long years? Were they not careful to serve and look after them well, for together they could live, at least till death? Believe me, your creditors will pray God for your life and fear your death even more fervently and devotedly, since they are fonder of the open palm than of the whole right arm, and love pennies better than their lives. Remember the usurers of Landeroust, who hanged themselves not long ago, when they saw the prices of wine and corn falling and the good times returning. As Pantagruel gave no answer, Panurge continued, Lord bless me, now I come to think of it, when you twit me with my debts and creditors, you're challenging my trump card. Why, by that achievement alone, I thought I had earned respect, reverence, and awe. For notwithstanding the universal opinion of philosophers, who say that out of nothing, nothing is made, although I possessed nothing and I had no prime substance, in this I was a maker and creator. And what had I created? So many good, fine creditors. Creditors are fine, good creatures, and I'll maintain that to everything short of the stake. The man who lends nothing is an ugly, wicked creature, created by the great ugly devil of hell. And what had I made? Debts, rare and excellent things, debts, I say, exceeding in number the syllables resulting from the combination of all the consonants with the vowels, a number once computed by the noble Xenocrats. If you judge of the perfection of debtors by the multitude of their creditors, you will not be far out in your practical arithmetic. Don't you suppose I'm pleased when every morning I see those debtors around me so humble, serviceable, and profuse in their bows? And when I notice that, if I show a pleasanter face and a warmer welcome to one than to another, the fellow imagines he'll be the first to get a settlement, and his payment will be first in date, and deduces from my smile that he will be paid in cash. Then I seem to be playing God in the Psalmer Passion Play, in the company of his angels and cherubim. These are my fawners, my parasites, my saluters, my sayers of good day, my perpetual speechifiers. I truly used to think that debts were the material of that hill of heroic virtues described by Hesiod, on which I hold the first degree of my licentiate, and towards which all human beings seem to aim and aspire, but which few climb owing to the difficulty of the path. For I see the whole world today in a fervent desire and vehement hunger to make fresh debts and creditors. All the same, not everyone is a debtor who wishes to be. Not everyone who wishes makes creditors, and you want to deprive me of this sovereign felicity. You ask me when I shall be out of debt. But worse still, I give myself to the good saint, Saint Babylon. If I haven't all my life looked upon debts as the connecting link between earth and heaven, the unique mainstay of the human race, one, I believe, without which all mankind would speedily perish. I looked upon them as, perhaps, that great soul of the universe which, according to the academics, gives all things life. In proof of this, calmly call up before your mind the idea and shape of some world. Take, if you will, the 30th of those imagined by the philosopher Metrodorus, or the 78th of Petron, in which there is no debtor or creditor, a world without debts. There among the planets there will be no regular tracks. All will be in disorder. Not recognizing his debt to Saturn, Jupiter will dispossess him of his sphere, and with his Homeric chain hold all intelligences, gods, heavens, demons, geniuses, heroes, devils, earth, sea, and all the elements in suspense. Saturn will ally himself to Mars, and they will put this whole world into confusion. Mercury will refuse to subject himself to the others. He will cease to be their Camillus, as he was called in the Etruscan tongue, for he will be in no way their debtor. Venus will not be venerated, for she will have lent nothing. The moon will remain bloody and dark, for why should the sun impart his light to her? He will be in no way bound to. The sun will not throw light on the earth. The stars will not send down their good influences, for the earth will have given up lending them nourishment in the form of those vapors and exhalations, by which, as Heraclitus said, as Stoics proved and Cicero maintained, the stars are fed. Amongst the elements, there will be no combinations, alternations, or transmutations of any kind, for one will not feel obliged by another, which has lent it nothing. Earth, then, will not be made into water. Water will not be transmuted into air. From air, no fire will be made. Fire will not warm earth. Earth will produce nothing but monsters, titans, alloids, and giants. Rain will not rain on it. Light will not light it. The wind will not blow on it, and it will have no summer or autumn. Lucifer will break his bonds, and issuing from the depths of hell with the Furies, fiends, and horned devils, will try to dislodge the gods of all nations, major and minor alike, from the heavens. This world in which nothing is lent will be no better than a dogfight, a more disorderly wrangle than the election of a rector in Paris, an interlude more confused than the devil's play at the mysteries of Due. Among men, one will not save the other. It will be lost labor to cry, help, fire, water, murder. No one will go to help. Why? Because he has lent nothing. No one owes him anything. No one has any interest in his fire, in his shipwreck, in his ruin, in his death. Not only has he not lent anything till then, but he would not have lent anything afterwards. In short, faith, hope, and charity will be banished from that world. For men are born to aid and succor one another. In their place will come mistrust, contempt, and rancor, with a cohort of all the evils, all the curses, all the miseries. You will think, rightly enough, that Pandora has split her jug on it. Men will be wolves to men, werewolves and hobgoblins, like Lycaon, Bellerophon, and Nebuchadnezzar of old. There will be brigands, assassins, poisoners, evildoers, evil thinkers, evil wishers, bearing hate each against all, like Ishmael, like Metabus, like Timon of Athens, who for that reason was called the misanthrope. Wherefore it would be easier for nature to keep fish in the air or to graze stags at the bottom of the ocean than to nourish this rascally rabble that does not lend. I thoroughly hate them all. On my oath I do. And if on the model of this peevish and perverse world, which lends nothing, you imagine the other little world, which is man, there you'll find a terrible confusion. The head will refuse to lend the sight of his eyes to guide the feet and hands. The feet will not agree to carry it, and the hands will cease to work for it. The heart will grow tired of continually beating for the benefit of the pulses in the limbs, and will lend them no more help. The lungs will not oblige it with their bellows. The liver will not send it blood for its nourishment. The bladder will not care to be in debt to the kidneys, and the urine will be stopped. When the brain considers this unnatural state of things, it will fall into a daze and give no feelings to the nerves, no movement to the muscles. In brief, in this disorganized world, which will owe nothing, lend nothing, and borrow nothing, you will see a more pernicious conspiracy than Aesop imagined in his Apology. The man will perish, no doubt, and not only perish, but perish soon, even if he be Asclepius himself. The body will rot immediately, and the soul in indignation will take its flight to all the devils, following my money. 4. The continuation of Panurge's speech in praise of lenders and debtors. On the other hand, Imagine to yourself another world in which everyone lends and everyone owes, where all are debtors and all are lenders. Oh, what a harmony there will be in the regular motions of the heavens. I believe that I can hear them just as clearly as Plato did. What sympathy there will be between the elements. Oh, how nature will delight in her works and productions. Ceres will be loaded with corn, Bacchus with wines, Flora with flowers, Pomona with fruit, Juno in her serene air, herself serene, salubrious, and delightful. I am lost in this contemplation. Among mankind, peace, love, affection, fidelity, repose, banquets, joy, gladness, gold, silver, small chains, rings, and merchandise will pass from hand to hand. No lawsuits, no war, no strife. No one there will be a usurer, nor a glutton, nor a miser, nor a refuser. Dear God, will it not be the age of gold, the reign of Saturn, the true image of the Olympic regions, in which all other virtues are suspended and charity alone rules, governs, dominates, and triumphs? All men will be good, all will be just. O happy world, O happy people in that world, 3 times and 4 times blessed. I really feel as if I were there. I swear to you by God's truth that if this world, this blessed world, which lends to everyone and refuses no one, had only a pope with his troops of cardinals and members of his holy college, in a few years you would see the saints were thicker on the ground, and working more wonders, with more services, more vows, more banners, and more wax candles than there are in all the 9 biospherifics of Brittany, excepting only St. Ives. Please remember that when the noble Patalan wanted to deify the father of William Jusselum, and by divine praises to extol him to the 3rd heaven, all that he said was, yes, and he lent his wares to those who wanted them. What a fine saying. Now on this model imagine our microcosm, our little world that is, which is man, with all his limbs lending, borrowing, and owing, that is to stay in his natural state, for nature has created man for no other purpose but to lend and borrow. The harmony of the heavens is not greater than his shall be under good government. The intention of the builder of this microcosm is that it shall house the soul, which he has put in as a guest, and shall also support life. Life consists of blood. Blood is the seed of the soul. Therefore there is only one task entrusted to this microcosm, that is continuously to forge blood. At the forge all the members play their different parts, and their hierarchy is such that one borrows incessantly from another, one lends to another, one is another's debtor. The material ore suitable to be transmuted into blood is provided by nature. It is bread and wine, and these two provide every kind of nourishment. Hence it is that the Gothic word componage can cover all the rest. To find, prepare, and cook this nourishment, the hands work, the feet move, and transport the whole mechanism. The eyes act as guides, the appetite in the orifice of the stomach, by means of a little sour black humor, which comes to it from the spleen, gives warning to shut in the food. The tongue makes a test of it, the teeth chew it, the stomach receives it, digests it, and chilifies it. The mesaraic veins suck out what is good and suitable, leaving the excrements, which are voided by an expulsive mechanism along special conduits, and conduct it to the liver, which transmutes it once more and turns it into blood. Think now what joy there must be among these officers at the sight of this golden stream, which is their sole restorative. The alchemist can know none greater, when after long toil, great trouble, and heavy expense, they see the metals transmuted in their furnaces. Then each member prepares itself and strives anew to purify and refine this treasure. The kidneys, by the renal conduits, draw off that liquid which you call urine and pass it down through the ureters. Below is its proper receptacle, the bladder, which in due course empties it out. The spleen draws off the earthy parts, the lees, which you call melancholy. The bile duct extracts the superfluous choler. Then the blood is transported for further refinement to another workshop, that is the heart, which by its diastolic and systolic movements so subtilizes and fires it that it is perfected in the right ventricle and sent through the veins to all the members. All the members, the feet, the hands, the eyes, and all the rest, absorb it and take nourishment from it, each in its own way. Thus they become debtors, who previously were lenders. In the left ventricle, the heart so subtilizes it that it is called spiritual, and then sends it to all the members through its arteries to heat and ventilate the rest of the blood in the veins. The lungs never cease to refresh it with their lappets and bellows, and in return for this service, the heart gives them of its best blood through the pulmonary artery. In the end, it is so refined in the miraculous network that it later becomes the material of the animal spirits, which endow us with imagination, reason, judgment, resolution, deliberation, ratiocination, and memory. God's my life. I drown, I perish. I lose my way when I begin to consider the profound abyss of this world of lenders and owers. It is, believe me, a divine thing to lend, a heroic virtue to owe. Yet this is not all, this borrowing, owing, lending worldly is so good that when this act of feeding is over, it immediately thinks of lending to those who are not yet born, by that loan perpetuating itself, if it can, and multiplying itself by means of its own replicas. That is, children. For this purpose each member cuts off and pares away some of the most precious and of its nourishment, and sends it below, where nature has prepared fitting vessels and receptacles for it, through which it descends to the genitories by long and circuitous windings. There it receives proper form and finds fitting places in man and woman alike for the conservation and perpetuation of the human race. This is all done by loans and debts one to another. Once it is called the debt of marriage. Penalties are inflicted by nature on those who refuse to pay, in the form of grievous vexation of the limbs and disturbances of the senses. But the reward assigned to the lender is pleasure, joy, and sensual delight. 5. Pantagruel's detestation of debtors and borrowers. I understand, answered Pantagruel. You seem to me good at argument and enthusiast for your cause. But if you preach and sermonize from now till Pentecost, you'll be astonished to find me finally unconvinced. With all your fine talk, you will never make me a debtor. Owe no man anything, says the holy apostle, save love and mutual delight. You provide me with fine illustrations and figures, which please me greatly. But let me tell you that if one of your shameless swaggers and tiresome borrowers were to make a second visit to a city that knew his habits, you would find the citizens more worried and alarmed by his entrance than if the plague had come in person. Dressed up as the Tyanean philosopher saw it at Ephesus, I don't think the Persians were wrong either when they reckoned lying to be the second vice, to owe being the first, for debts and lies are generally involved together. I do not want to infer, nevertheless, that one must never owe and never lend. No man is so rich that he does not sometimes owe money. No man is so poor that sometimes one may not borrow from him. The occasion must only be such as that described by Plato in his Laws, when he says that no one must let his neighbors draw water at his well, unless they have first dug on their own soil so deep as to find that kind of earth that is called ceramist, that is, potter's clay. And yet I found no spring or water channel, for owing to its texture, which is oily, strong, smooth, and dense, this clay holds the moisture and does not easily allow escape or evaporation. It is a great disgrace, therefore, always and in all places, to borrow from everybody rather than to work and earn, and in my opinion, one should only lend when a person has worked but has not been able to earn by his labors, or when he has suddenly sustained an unexpected loss of his goods. However, let us leave this subject, but henceforth do not have recourse to creditors. From past owings I absolve you. The least I can do in this matter, said Panurge, is to thank you, and if thanks should be proportionate to the benefactor's affection, I must thank you infinitely and everlastingly, for the love that, of your grace, you bear me, is beyond the hazard of computation. It is infinite and everlasting. But if I take the caliber of the benefits and the recipient's pleasure as my standard, my thanks won't be so very great. You do me many favors, far more than my own merits, or my services, to you deserve. That I am bound to confess, but in the present case, you have not done as much as you think. What pains me, what gripes and itches me, is to think what sort of figure I shall cut in future, now that I am out of debt. I shall be pretty awkward, believe me, for the first few months, seeing that I have been brought up to this state of things, and I'm not used to it. Indeed, it frightens me very much. What's more, from now on, not a fart will blow off in all Salmagundia that isn't aimed at my nose, for every farter in the whole world says as he farts, "Now we're quits." My life will soon be over, I can foresee that. I leave you the making of my epitaph. For I shall die pickled in farts, and if some day the ordinary medicaments fail to restore her blowing power to some good woman in the last agony of a windy colic, the mummy oil from my wretched befarted body will serve the physicians as a quick remedy. After the smallest dose imaginable, they'll fart more than they expect. That is why I implore you to leave me some 100 or so debts, as Mille Dillers, Bishop of Chartres, begged King Louis XI to leave him a few lawsuits to keep his hand in. When the king offered him a complete immunity, I would rather give them all my revenue from snails together with my income from beetles, though I'll surrender no part of my capital. Let us leave this subject, said Pantagruel. This is the second time I have suggested it. 6. Why newly married men were exempt from going to the wars. By the way, asked Panurge, by what law was it ordained and established that the planters of new vineyards, builders of new houses, and the newly married should be exempted from going to the wars for the first year? By the law of Moses, replied Pantagruel. Why the newly married? Asked Panurge. As for planters of vineyards, I'm too old to bother about them. I leave the vine dressers to look after themselves. As for your grand builders up of dead stones, there is nothing written about them in my book of life. I only build up live stones, by which I mean men. According to my judgment, replied Pantagruel, the purpose of the law was that for the first year they should enjoy all the pleasures of the full, have time to produce progeny, and provide themselves with heirs. Then, even if in the second year they were killed in the war, their name of coat of arms would be perpetuated by their children. Another purpose was to make certain whether their wives were barren or fruitful, for the trial of 1 year seemed to them enough. Seeing the ripe age at which they then used to marry, this made a second marriage easier to arrange after the decease of the first husband, the fertile being wedded to men who wished to multiply and have issue. The barren to those who did not desire family would accept wives for their virtues, learning, and charm, solely for the sake of domestic comfort and good housekeeping. The preachers of Varennes, said Panurge, decry second marriages. They call them foolish and dishonorable. Yes, they're about as fond of them as of a good quartan og, answered Pantagruel. I agree, said Panurge, and so does Father Trumpery. When he was preaching a sermon at Perilly against second marriages, he swore that the swiftest devil in hell could fly off with him if he wouldn't prefer to take 100 virgins maidenheads than to Roger one widow. I find your argument good and well-founded, but what would you say if his exemption were granted them only because, in the course of this same first year, they had done such valiant field work on their newly possessed loves as was only right and proper, and so exhausted their spermatic vessels that they were left quite ragged and unmanned, all weak and drooping? For then, when the day of battle came, they would be more likely to dive in among the baggage like ducks than to stand among the combatants, among the brave champions. There were, and stirs the fray, and sword rings on sword. Under Mars' banner, they wouldn't strike one worthwhile blow, for their great blows would have been struck behind the curtains of his sweetheart Venus. In proof of this, I can quote you an old custom surviving today among other relics of antiquity. Remember how in all good houses, after a certain number of days, they sent newly married men to see an uncle, so as to get them away from their wives and give them a temporary rest, during which time they can replenish themselves in order to fight better on their return. Very often, in fact, they have no uncle or aunt at all. In the same way, King Crackard, after the Battle of Courtemaons, did not, properly speaking, discharge us, Pot-Hunter and myself, I mean, but sent us to take a rest in our own houses. He's still looking for his. My grandfather's godmother used to tell me, when I was little, that paternosters and prayers are for those who know how to remember their sound. One piper going to the wars is better than 2 homeward bound. What confirms me in this opinion is that vine planters seldom ate the grapes or drank the wine of their labors during the first year, and builders for the first year did not inhabit their newly made houses for fear of suffocation, a fact that is noted by the learned Galen in his second book on the difficulties of breathing. I did not ask this question without most consequent cause and most resonant reasons, so don't be displeased, sir. 7. Panurge has a flea in his ear and gives up wearing his magnificent codpiece. The next day Panurge had his right ear pierced in the Jewish fashion and put in a little gold ring of inlaid work in the bezel of which was set a flea. I should not like you to remain in doubt on any point, for it is a fine thing to be well informed in every particular. So I will tell you that the flea was black, and the cost of it carefully checked by his exchequer amounted quarterly to only little more than the marriage of a Hyrcanian tigress, or as you might say, 600,000 maravedis. He was bothered by this excessive expenditure now that he was out of debt, but afterward he fed it, like any tyrant or lawyer, on the sweat and blood of his subjects. He took 5 yards of coarse brown cloth, which he wore draped around him like a long coat. He left off his breeches, and he tied a pair of spectacles to his cap. In this condition he presented himself before Pantagruel, who found the disguise strange, especially as he missed that fine and magnificent codpiece on which Panurge had once relied, as on a holy anchor, as his last resort in all the shipwrecks of adversity. Somewhat mystified, therefore, the good Pantagruel questioned him, asking what this new transformation might signify. "I have the flea in my ear," replied Panurge, "since I have a mind to marry." "Good luck to you," said Pantagruel. "I am delighted with the news, though really I wouldn't reckon on it. I wouldn't pledge my oath it'll come off. It isn't the habit of lovers to have their trousers tumbling down like this, and their shirts hanging out over their breechless knees, or to wear brown serge, a most unusual color for the robes of persons of honor and quality. If certain adherents to particular heresies and sects have dressed themselves like this in the past, I will not blame them or pass any adverse judgment on them, though many have imputed this habit to quackery, imposture, and an affectation of superiority over the common herd. Everyone is full of his own ideas, especially on external, peripheral, and indifferent matters, that are neither good nor bad in themselves, because they do not proceed from our hearts and minds, which are the factory of all good and all evil. Good if the feelings are good and controlled by the righteous spirit, evil if the feelings are wickedly depraved by the spirit of evil. It is only the novelty and this contempt for common fashion that I dislike." "The color," replied Panurge, "is suitable for my office. Henceforth I mean to have an office and to look closely into my affairs. Since I am now out of debt, I shall be as disagreeable as any man you've ever seen, if God doesn't help me to be patient. Look at my spectacles. If you saw me from a distance, I expect you would say, 'Here's Father Jean Bourgeois,' and you would not be far out. Next year I really believe I shall preach a new crusade. God keep my pilgrims safe in my ball bag. Do you see this brown serge? Believe me, there is an occult quality about it that's known to very few. I only put it on this morning, but already I'm raging, itching, and crackling to be married and to work at my wife like a brown devil, without fear of a beating. Oh, what a great householder I'll be. After my death, they'll have me burned on a noble pyre, so as to keep my ashes as a memory and a relic of the perfect householder. God's truth, my treasure, had better not play at cooking the accounts on his brown cloth of mine, or the blows will soon begin to rain down on him. Side note, this brown cloth was used to cover exchequer tables. There are a number of puns on this point that cannot be brought over into English. Look at me both before and behind. It is in the shape of the toga, the ancient apparel of the Romans in times of peace. I took the pattern from Trajan's column at Rome, also from the triumphal arch of Septimus Severus. I'm tired of wars, tired of military cloaks and padded jerkins. My shoulders are quite worn out by the weight of harness. Let there be an end of armor. Let togas reign, at least for all this next year, if I marry, as you explained to me yesterday, when you talk about the Mosaic law. As for breeches, my great-aunt Lawrence told me long ago that they were made only for the codpiece. I believe it, by the same argument as that jolly fellow Galen uses, when he says in his 9th book on the use of our limbs, that the head was made for the eyes, for nature could have placed our heads on our knees or on our elbows, but since she required the eyes to see things from afar, she fixed them in the head, as it were on a pole, at the highest part of the body, in just the same way we see lighthouses and high towers erected above seaports so that the lantern may be seen from far off. Now, because I should like, for some space of time, a year at least, to take a respite from the profession of arms, I mean because I should like to marry, I no longer wear a codpiece, and consequently I no longer wear breeches, for the codpiece is the first piece of harness in the arming of a warrior, and I maintain even to the stake, though stopping short of actual burning, you understand, that the Turks are not properly armed seeing that the wearing of codpieces is a thing forbidden by their law. 8. To prove that the codpiece is the principal piece in a warrior's armor. Would you maintain, asked Pantagruel, that the codpiece is the principal piece of military harness? That is very new and paradoxical doctrine, for we say that a man's army begins with his spurs. I maintain it, replied Panurge, and not wrongfully do it. I maintain it. Consider nature. She wishes the plants, trees, shrubs, herbs, and zoophytes, which she has created, to be perpetuated and to last to all successive ages, without the species ever dying out. Although the individuals perish, she has cunningly armed their germs and seeds, therefore, in which lies this same perpetuity. She has provided and covered them with admirable ingenuity, with husks, sheaths, caps, kernels, small cups, shells, ears, down, bark, and prickly holes, which are to them like fine, strong, natural codpieces. This is clearly exemplified in beans, peas, haricots, walnuts, white apricots, cotton plants, sorb apples, corn, poppies, lemons, chestnuts, and all plants generally, in which quite obviously the German seed is better covered, protected, and armored than any other part. Now nature did not provide in this way for the survival of the human race. She created man naked, tender, and fragile, without arms offensive or defensive, in a state of innocence, the first golden age. She created man as an animate being, not a plant, as an animate being, I say, born for the miraculous enjoyment of all fruits and vegetable plants, an animate being born for specific domination over all the beasts. When evil began to multiply among men, with the coming of the Iron Age and the reign of Jupiter, the earth began to produce among the vegetables needles, thistles, thorns, and other kinds of rebels against man. Furthermore, by a decree of fate, nearly all the animals broke free from him, and tacitly conspired together to serve him no longer, to obey him no longer, in so far as they could resist him, but to harm him to the extent of their faculties and power. Man, therefore, wishing to maintain his original enjoyment and continue in his former dominion, not being able, moreover, conveniently to do without the services of several animals, was compelled for the first time to arm himself. By the holy goose of Genet, exclaimed Pantagruel, you become a great slipper-slopper, I should say philosopher, since the last reigns. Consider, Panurge went on, how nature inspired him to arm himself, and what part of the body he first began to armor. It was, as God's my life, his bullocks. And when Master Priapus was done, he did not ask for the same again. Such is the testimony of that Hebrew captain and philosopher Moses, who affirms that man armed himself with a brave and gallant codpiece, made after a mighty fine invention from the leaves of a fig tree, which are simple and altogether suitable in toughness, delicacy of shape, curliness, smoothness, size, color, smell, virtues, and faculties for covering and arming the bullocks. I make an exception, of course, of those tremendous Lorraine bullocks, which fall at a gallop to the bottom of the breeches, cannot bear to dwell in a high codpiece, and are altogether monstrous, as witness Villardier, the noble Valentine, whom I discovered one May day at Nancy scrubbing his, which he had spread out on a table like a Spanish cloak, in order to make himself more captivating. So henceforth, let no one who doesn't want to make a gaff say to a militiaman, as he sees him off to the war, Stevie, look after the pot of wine, meaning, of course, his head. Instead, he must say, Stevie, look after the pot of milk. That is to say, his testicles, in the name of all the devils in hell. When a man loses his head, only the individual perishes, but if the balls were lost, the whole human race would die out. It was this that moved the gallant Galen in his first book, On the Sperm, to conclude boldly that it would be better, that is to say, less bad, to have no heart than to have no genitories. For in the testicles, as in a sacred repository, lies the germ, which preserves the whole human stock. Indeed, I should not ask as much as 100 francs to believe that these were the very stones with which Deucalion and Pyrrha restored the race of man, when it was destroyed by the deluge, of which the poets tell. It was this that moved the valiant Justinian, in his fourth book, on putting up with bigots, to place the summum bonum in braguibus et braguetus, the supreme virtue in breeches and codpieces. It was for this and other reasons that once when the Lord of Merville was trying on a new suit of armor, in order to follow his king to the war, for he could not use his old half-rusty suit any more, because for some years the skin of his stomach had stood rather far away from his kidneys, his wife observed in a contemplative spirit that he attached very little value to the common store and staff of their marriage, seeing that he only armed it with links of mail. She advised him to protect and parapet it well with a great jousting helmet, which was lying idle in his closet. Of this lady the following verses were written in the 3rd book of the Maiden's Shittery. She saw her husband fully armed, before his codpiece going to war. She said, "My dear, in case you're harmed, arm that as well. That is most dear." Should she be blamed for this warning? I say, oh no. Think of her fear, that she might lose that little thing that stirred and that she held so dear. So recover from your astonishment at this new rig of mine, sir. 9. How Panurge consulted Pantagruel as to whether he should marry. As Pantagruel did not reply, Panurge continued with a deep sigh. My lord, you have heard my intention, which is to marry. Unless by bad luck all holes have been closed, stopped, and secured, I beg you by the love you have so long borne me, to give me your advice on this subject. Well, replied Pantagruel, since you have cast the dice once and for all, and have decreed and have taken a firm resolution to the matter, there is no need for further talk. All that remains is to put your resolution into effect. Yes, said Panurge, but I should want to put it into effect without your counsel and good advice. I advise you to do it, said Pantagruel. I counsel you to marry. But, said Panurge, if you knew that it was better for me to stay as I am, and not undertake anything new, I would much rather not marry. Then don't marry, answered Pantagruel. But, said Panurge, would you want me to remain single like this for the whole of my life, without conjugal company? You know that it is written, Vicely, woe to him that is alone. A man on his own has never the comforts that you see married people have. For God's sake, marry then, replied Pantagruel. But if, said Pantagruel, my wife were to make me a cuckold, and you know this is a great year for cuckolds, that would be enough to make me fly off the hinges of patience. I like cuckolds, all right. They seem good fellows to me, and I like visiting their houses, but I'd rather die than be one of them. That's a point that pricks me hard. It points, then, against your marrying, replied Pantagruel, for Seneca's maxim, what you have done to another, be sure another will do to you, applies without exception. Do you say without exception? Asked Panurge. Without exception, he says it, replied Pantagruel. Ho, ho, said Panurge, that's the devil, but I suppose he means either in this world or in the next. Still, you see, since I can't do without a woman any more than a blind man can do without a stick, for the old John Thomas has to be kept occupied. Otherwise I couldn't live. Wouldn't it be better for me to ally myself with some honorable and virtuous woman rather than change from day to day like this, in continual danger of getting a beating, or even worse, the pox? For I have never had to do with an honest wife. I mean no disrespect to the husbands. Get married then, for God's sake, replied Pantagruel. But, said Panurge, what if by God's will I happened to marry some honest woman and she were to beat me, unless I were a perfect little Job, that would drive me stark mad? For these very virtuous women, I've been told, usually have bad tempers. That's why they keep good vinegar in their cupboards. But if she got violent, I'd go one better. I'd so beat and bang her giblets, her arms and legs and lungs and liver and spleen, I mean. I'd so mangle and tatter her clothing with the banging I'd give her that the great devil himself would come to hell's door to wait for her accursed soul, but I could do without that sort of shindy for this year. Indeed, I'd be glad never to return into one at all. Have nothing to do with marrying, then, replied Pantagruel. But, said Panurge, being in the state that I am, free of debt and unmarried, mark what I say, out of debt and bad luck to it. For if I were heavily in debt, my creditors would be only too careful of my paternity. But being out of debt and unmarried, I haven't anyone who would fuss over me, or feel the sort of love for me that they say conjugal love is. And if I happened to fall ill, I should not be at all well looked after. The wise man says, where there is no woman, I understand by that a mother or family, bound in lawful wedlock, the sick man is in a bad way. I have seen clear instances of it in the case of popes, legates, cardinals, bishops, abbots, priors, priests, and monks. You shall never find me in that state. Then for God's sake, marry, replied Pantagruel. But if, said Panurge, I were ill and incapable of my husbandly duties, my wife might be impatient of my sickness and give herself to another man. Then not only wouldn't she help me in my need, but she'd laugh at my misfortune and, what's worse, she'd rob me, as I've often seen it happen. That would put the finishing touch to my misery, and send me running about the fields in my nightshirt. Don't run into marriage, then, replied Pantagruel. But, said Panurge, there's no other way of getting legitimate sons and daughters, by whom I can hope to perpetuate my name and armorial bearings, and to whom I can leave my inheritances and acquisitions. And I shall get some fine ones, too, one of these days, without a doubt. And what's more, I shall be a great dealer in mortgages, for I want children that I can be happy with when otherwise I should be glum. There would be the same love between me and my children as I see every day there is between your benign and gracious father and yourself, and as there is between all worthy people in the privacy of their own homes, being free from debt and unmarried, being perhaps vexed and angry, but instead of comforting me, I think you're laughing at my troubles. Get married, then, for God's sake, replied Pantagruel. 10. Pantagruel points out to Panurge the difficulty of offering advice about marriage, and something is said of the Homeric and Virgilian lotteries. Your advice, if I may be allowed to say so, said Panurge, seems like Ricochet's song to me. It's nothing but taunts and jokes and contradictory repetitions. One of them cancels out the other, and I don't know which to go by. But there are so many ifs and buts about your propositions, too, replied Pantagruel, that I can't base anything on them or come to any conclusions. Aren't you certain of your own wishes? That's the principal point. All the rest is fortuitous and depends on the disposition of the heavenly fates. We see a good number of people so lucky in that respect, that their marriage seems a shining reflection, a very embodiment of the joys of paradise. Others are so unlucky that the devils who tempt the hermits in the desert of the Thebaid and Montserrat are not more miserable. The only thing, then, is to put things to the chance with blindfolded eyes, bowing your head, kissing the earth, and for the rest, entrusting yourself to God, seeing that you have made up your mind to go in for it. That is the only thing I can tell you for certain. But here is something that you do if you think fit. Bring me the works of Virgil. If you open it up 3 times at random, and on the page that your finger strikes read the lines whose number you have agreed on, then we can explore your future as a husband. Many a man has learned his fate by the Homeric lots. Witness Socrates, in prison, who, hearing the line concerning Achilles, recited from the 9th book of the Iliad. And if the great earth-shaker gives a breeze, the 3rd day out I'll make it home to Pythia. Foresaw that he would die on the 3rd day following, and assured Aeschines of the fact. This was recorded by Plato in the Crito, by Cicero in his 1st book on divination, and by Diogenes Laertius. Witness only Opilius Macrinus, who wished to know whether he would be emperor of Rome, and drew as a lot this sentence from the 8th book of the Iliad. Old man, they have you in a bad way, these young Trojans. Age bears hard on you, your strength is going, your groom is wobbly, and your beasts are spent. In fact, he was already old, and after ruling the empire for only a year and 2 months, was dispossessed and slain by the young and powerful Heliogabalus. Witness also Brutus, who wished to learn the outcome of the battle of Pharsalia, in which he was killed, and drew this verse spoken of Patroclus in the 16th book of the Iliad.
No, Leto's son and fatal destiny have killed me, that is to say, by Apollo, whose name was the watchword on the day of that battle. Many notable events and matters of great importance were ascertained and foretold in the olden days, by the Virgilian lots also, even including the succession to the Roman Empire, as in the case of Alexander Severus, who, on consulting the lotteries, lighted on the following verse of the 6th book of the Aeneid. But Rome, 'tis thine alone, with awful sway, to rule mankind and make the world obey. And a few years later he was actually, and in fact, made emperor of Rome. The Emperor Hadrian also, when he was in some doubt and perplexity as to what the Emperor Trajan thought of him, and whether he loved him, consulted the Virgilian lots, and came upon these lines from the 6th book of the Aeneid. But what's the man who from afar appears, his head with olive crowned, his hand a censer bears, his hoary beard and holy vestments bring, his lost idea back, I know the Roman king. After this he was adopted by Trajan, and succeeded him as emperor. Claudius II, the much belauded emperor of Rome, also resorted to these lots, and drew the following verse from the 6th book of the Aeneid. Whilst the 3rd summer saw him reign a king in Latium. In fact, he only reigned 2 years. Again he consulted the lots about his brother Quintilius, whom he wished to take as co-emperor. and drew this verse from the 6th book of the Aeneid, whom fate just let us see, and would no longer suffer him to be. Which proved correct, for he was killed 17 days after taking over the administration of the empire. The same lot fell to the Emperor Gordian the Younger, and to Clodius Albinus, when he was anxious to hear good news of the future. Came these lines from the 6th book of the Aeneid. The Romans boiling with tumultuous rage, this warrior shall the dangerous storm assuage. With victories he the Carthaginian mauls, and with strong hands shall crush the rebel Gauls. Also when Divus Claudius, the emperor before Aurelian, was eagerly inquiring after the fate of his posterity, and the following lot was drawn from the 1st book of the Aeneid. No bounds are to be set, no limits here. Indeed, he had a long line of successors. And when Master Pierre Amy experimented, in order to know if he would escape from the hobgoblin's plot, he drew this verse in the 3rd book of the Aeneid. Side note, the hobgoblins, as in other passages, are the ignorant and bigoted Franciscans. End side note. Ah, flee the bloody land, the wicked shore. And so he escaped from their land, safe and sound. There are thousands of others whose adventures it would be too tedious to relate, yet all of which fell out according to the prophecies, read from verses drawn in this way by the lots. I do not wish to infer, however, that this lottery is universally infallible, for I should not like you to be deluded. 11. Pantagruel points out that divination by dice is unlawful. It would be sooner decided when done with, said Panurge, with three good dice. No, replied Pantagruel, that method is deceptive, unlawful, and utterly scandalous. Never rely on it. That accursed book, the game of dice, was concocted by our old enemy, the eternal calumniator, long ago near Bora in Achaea. He led many a simple soul to error in ancient times before the statue of the Barak Hercules. He enticed many and many a man into his snares, and still does so today in many places. You know that my father, Gargantua, has forbidden this book throughout his dominions, and has had it burned with all its types and engravings. Indeed, he has completely exterminated, suppressed, and abolished it as a most dangerous plague. What I have said to you of dice, I also say of the double cubes, an equally deceitful form of divination. Do not bring forward as an argument against me the fortunate throw of double cubes made by Tiberius in the fountain of Aponus, at the oracle of Geryon. These are hooks by which the calumniator draws simple souls to their eternal perdition. Nevertheless, in order to satisfy you, I am quite agreeable for you to throw 3 dice on this table. Then, according to the score that you throw, we will pick the line on the page of the book where you open it. Have you any dice here in your purse? A whole bagful, answered Panurge. They are my green sprig, my safeguard against the devil, as recommended by Merlin Cocceius in his 2nd book about the country of the devils. The devil would catch me napping if he caught me without dice. The dice were produced and thrown, and showed 5, 6, and 5. That, said Panurge, is 16. Let us take the 16th line on the page. The number pleases me. I think that our luck will be good. I'll go charging against all the devils of hell, like a bull against a set of 9 pins, or a cannonball through a battalion of foot soldiers, and let the devils look out for themselves. If I don't work on my future wife just that number of times on my wedding night. I have no doubt that you will, replied Pantagruel. There was no need to come out with such a thundering affirmation. First time you'll serve a fault, which will count 15, and as you come down from roost you'll amend it. That'll make exactly 16. Do you understand it like that? Asked Panurge. Never was a solecism committed by that valiant champion who stands sentinel for me just under my belly. Have you ever found me in the brotherhood of defaulters? Never, 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 till the last game. I perform like a holy father, like a father confessor without fault. I appeal to the players. As soon as he had spoken these words, the works of Virgil were brought in, but before opening them, Panurge said to Pantagruel, My heart's flapping in my breast like a glove. Just feel how the pulse in my left arm is beating. You would imagine, from its fevered rapidity, that I was being mauled by the examiners of the Sorbonne, Don't you think that before proceeding further we ought to invoke Hercules and the Tenite goddesses, who are said to preside over the chamber of lots? Neither Hercules nor the goddesses, replied Pantagruel. Just open the book with your finger. 12. Pantagruel inquires of the Virgilian lottery how Panurge's marriage will turn out. Then Panurge opened the book and found the following verse on line 16. The god him from his table banished, nor would the goddess have him in her bed. That, said Pantagruel, is not in your favor. It signifies that your wife will be a whore, and consequently you'll be a cuckold. The goddess whose opposition you will meet is Minerva, a very fierce virgin, a most powerful and fire-eating goddess, an enemy of cuckolds, fancy boys, and adulterers, a foe to lewd women who do not keep their promised vows to their husbands and are free with themselves to others. The god is Jupiter, who thunders and flashes lightning from the heavens. And you will note that, according to the doctrine of the ancient Etruscans, the Manubes, for that is what they called the hurling of the Vulcanian thunderbolts, is reserved for her alone. An instance of this you will find in her burning of the ships of Ajax Oileus, and for Jupiter, who bore her from his head. The rest of the Olympic gods are not permitted to hurl thunder, and are therefore not so much dreaded by mankind. I will tell you more, and you may take it as draw from divine mythology. When the giants made war upon the gods at first despised such enemies, and said that there was not one of them who was a match even for their pages. But when they saw Mount Pelion piled upon Mount Ossa by these giant labors, and Mount Olympus began to shake as they prepared to place it on the other two, they were all afraid. Then Jupiter held a great general council, at which all the gods decided that they must put up a valiant defense, and since they had several times seen battles lost through the interference of women among the soldiers, it was decreed that for the time being the whole crew of goddesses should be banished from the heavens into Egypt and the borders of the Nile, disguised as weasels, polecats, bats, shrew mice, and such like. Only Minerva was kept back to throw the thunder with Jupiter, she being a goddess both of learning and war, of counsel and execution, a goddess born armed, a goddess dreaded in heaven, in the air, in the sea, and on earth. By the belly of Saint Buff, exclaimed Panurge, could I then be that Vulcan the poet speaks about? No, I'm not lame, nor a coiner of false money, nor a blacksmith, as he was. Perhaps my wife will be as beautiful and attractive as his Venus, but she won't be such a whore, and I won't be a cuckold like him. The wretched cripple had himself declared a cuckold by judgment, given in full assembly of the gods. So now listen to the other side. This augury denotes that my wife will be modest, chaste, and faithful, not up in arms or rebellious or headstrong and head-born like Pallas. And this fine ram Jupiter won't be my rival. You won't dip his bread in my soup, even though we sit together at table. Jupiter's exploits and gallant deeds. He was always the stoutest wencher and most infamous friar, I should say whoremonger, that ever was. Always as lecherous as a boar. Indeed, he was fostered by a sow on Dicte in Crete, if Agathocles the Babylonian is not a liar. He was as randy as a goat, which is why others say that he was suckled by the she-goat, Amalthea, by the powers of Acheron. He played the ram one day to a third part of the world, animals and men, rivers and mountains. I am thinking of Europa. For that ramish feat, the people of Ammon had him represented as a ram ramming a horn ram. But I know the way to protect myself against this horn fellow. Believe me, he'll find me no foolish Amphitryon, no silly Argus with his 100 pairs of spectacles, no cowardly Acrisius, no fantastic Lycus of Thebes, no dreamy Agenor, nor phlegmatic Asopus, no hairy-footed Lycaon, no misshapen Coritus of Tuscany, no Atlas with a strong back. He can transform himself hundreds and hundreds of times into a swan, a bull, a satyr, a shower of gold, or a cuckoo, as he did when he took the maiden head of his sister Juno into an eagle, a ram, or a pigeon, as he did when he was in love with the virgin Pythia, who lived at Aegium, into fire, into a serpent, or even into a flea, into Epicurean atoms, or magistronostrally, into the thought of a thought. But I'll catch him by the neck. And do you know what I'll do to him? God's truth, I'll do to him what Saturn did to his father, Calus. Seneca said it before me, and Lactantius confirmed it, what Rhea did to Aetus. I'll cut off his bollock's flesh with his bum. There won't be a shred left. For that reason, he'll never be pope, for testiculos non habet. That'll do, my lad, that'll do, said Pantagruel. Opened the book a second time. This time he met with the following verse. Membra quatit gelidusque quid forminide ne sanguis. Fright shakes his limbs, with fear his blood turns cold. That signifies, said Pantagruel, that she'll beat you, back and belly. On the contrary, said Panurge, the prognostication applies to me, and says that I shall maul her like a tiger if she annoys me. Martin Wagstaff will do the job, and if I have no staff, the devil devours me if I don't eat her up alive, as Cambyses, king of the Lydians, ate his queen. You're very brave, said Pantagruel. Hercules himself wouldn't take you on in your present fury, but they say that poor Jack is worth two, and Hercules never dared fight alone against two. And am I poor Jack? Asked Panurge. Oh, no, answered Pantagruel. I was thinking of the games of lurch and backgammon. On his third attempt, Panurge drew the verse. Fomeneo prede et sopholorum ardebat amor. She burned with all a woman's love for spoils and booty. That signifies, said Pantagruel, that she'll rob you. I can see your fate perfectly from these three draws. You'll be cuckolded, you'll be beaten, and you'll be robbed. On the contrary, replied Panurge, this verse signifies that she'll love me with a perfect love. The satirist didn't lie when he said that a woman burning with love supreme sometimes takes pleasure in stealing from her lover. And what, I ask you, a glove or a clasp to make him search for it? Some trivial thing, nothing of importance? In the same way, these little arguments, these wranglings that arise at times between lovers, are just fresheners and spurs to love. Don't we sometimes see cutlers, for example, hammer their whetstones, the better to sharpen their tools on them? For that reason I take these three omens as most definitely favorable to me. If not, I appeal. One can never appeal, said Pantagruel, from what is decreed by lot and fortune, as our ancient jurisconsults attest, and as is stated by Baldus in his last chapter on the laws. The reason is that fortune recognizes no superior to whom one can appeal from her, and she decrees. In this case, the ward cannot be restored to his full rights, as is plainly declared in L8 Praetor S. Ult. F. D. Minor, Laws from the Digest concerning inheritance and wardship. 13. Pantagruel advises Panurge to test the future happiness or unhappiness of his marriage by dreams. Now, since we don't agree in the interpretation of the Virgilian lottery, let us try another form of divination. Which one? Asked Panurge. A good, old, and genuine institution, replied Pantagruel. Divination by dreams. For when we dream under the conditions described by Hippocrates in his dream book, by Plato, Plotinus, Iamblichus, Synesius, Xenophon, Galen, Plutarch, Artemidorus, Daldianus, Herophilus, Hugh Caliber, Theocritus, Pliny, Athenaeus, and others, the soul often foresees future events. There is no need to prove it to you at greater length. You'll be convinced by a common example. Think how once well-washed, well-fed, and well-suckled children are sleeping soundly. Their nurses go off to enjoy a bit of freedom, feeling at that time licensed to do as they like, for they have no need to stay around the cradle. In the same way, once our body is sleeping and the digestion is everywhere complete, nothing more being necessary till it awakes, the soul enjoys itself and revisits its own country, which is the heavens. There it receives intimations of its first and divine origins. There it contemplates that infinite intellectual sphere, the center of which is at all points in the universe, and the circumference nowhere, which sphere, according to the doctrine of Hermes Trismegistus, is God. Trismegistus. Nothing new befalls the soul. Nothing is the past escapes it. Nothing in the past escapes it. It suffers no diminution. To it, all time is present. It notes not only events in this lower world of motion, but also future happenings. And when it reports them to the body, and through the body's senses and organs communicates them to its friends, it is called vaticinal, and prophetic. It is true that it does not report them as straightforwardly as it saw them, being prevented by the imperfection and frailty of the bodily senses, even as the moon, receiving her light from the sun, does not communicate it to us as clearly, purely, vividly, and ardently as she received it. Therefore, these somnial vaticinations require an interpreter, a skillful, wise, and industrious expert, rational and absolute, or neurocritic and oneiropolist, for so the Greek called them. That is why Heraclitus said that dreams did not reveal anything to us, nor conceal anything from us, but that they gave us a sign and indication for things to come. Fortunate or unfortunate for ourselves or for others, Holy Scripture testifies to this. And profane history confirms it by relating 1,000 instances in which events have occurred in fulfillment of a dream, sometimes to the dreamer, sometimes to someone else. The Atlanteans and those living on the island of Thasos are lacking in this faculty, for in those countries no one has ever dreamed. Cleon of Dalia, Thrasmedes, and in our own time the learned Frenchman Villanovanus were also among those who did not dream. Tomorrow, therefore, at the hour when jocund dawn shall with her rosy fingers drive away the darkness of the night, give yourself up to sound dreaming. Till then put aside all human affections, love, hatred, hope, and fear. For as of old, the great seer Proteus, while disguised and transformed into fire, water, a tiger, a dragon, and other strange shapes, could not foretell events to come, and therefore, in order to foretell them, had to be restored to his own native shape. So man cannot receive the divine art of prophecy, except when that part of him, which is most divine, to wit, his nous, or mens, the spiritual mind, is quiet, tranquil, peaceable, and neither occupied nor distracted by extraneous passions or affections. I'm willing, said Panurge. Should I take a small or a large supper this evening? If I don't eat a good large supper, I never really sleep well. My sleep is disturbed all night, and my dreams are as empty as my belly that is at the time.
No supper at all would be best, said Pantagruel, considering your good state and healthy constitution. An ancient prophet called Amphiaraus insisted that those who receive his oracles in dreams should eat nothing all of that day, and drink no wine for 3 days previously. But we will not resort to so extreme and rigorous a regimen. I well believe that a man full of meat and overstuffed would have difficulty in gaining knowledge of spiritual matters. But I do not agree with those who believe that they can enter into deeper contemplation of celestial things after long and obstinate fasting. You may easily remember how my father, Gargantua, whom I mention in all honor, has often told us that the writings of the fasting hermits are as flat, meager, and sour-spittled as were their bodies when they composed them, and that it is difficult to keep the spirit sound and serene while the body is in a state of inanition, seeing that philosophers and doctors affirm that the animal spirits spring up, are born, and are active in the arterial blood, purified and refined to a pure state in that miraculous network which lies beneath the ventricles of the brain. He gives us an example of a philosopher who thought he was in solitude, and that having departed from the crowd he could now theorize, reason, and write, and yet all the time around him dogs were barking, wolves howling, lions roaring, horses neighing, elephants trumpeting, serpents hissing, asses braying, grasshoppers chirping, and turtle doves cooing. In fact, he was in more turmoil than if he had been at the fair of Fontenay or of Niort. For hunger racked his body, and to remedy hunger, the stomach barks, the sight grows dim, the veins suck up the very substance of the fleshy limbs, and draw down the roaming spirit. The spirit then neglects to look after its nourisher and natural host. The body, as when a hawk upon the fist, striving to fly up into the air, is suddenly pulled downward by the leash. And on this point he also quoted to us the authority of Homer, father of all philosophy, who said that the Greeks did not put an end to their mourning for Patroclus, the great friend of Achilles, till the moment when hunger declared itself and their bellies protested that they would provide no more tears, for in their bodies, exhausted by their long fast, nothing was left to weep or cry with. Mediocrity is in all cases meritorious, and here you shall observe it. You will eat at supper not beans, not hare, or any other flesh, nor squid, which is called polypus, nor cabbage, nor any other food which might trouble and darken your animal spirits. For as the mirror cannot reflect the images of the things presented and exposed before it if its polish is obscured by breath or misty weather, so the spirit does not receive the shapes for divination by dreams if the body is disquieted and troubled by the vapors and fumes of meats previously eaten, and this on account of the indissoluble sympathy between the body and soul. You can eat some good Sabine and Bergamo pears, one ribstone pippin, some plums from Tours, and a few cherries from my own orchard. Then you need not fear that your dreams will prove doubtful, fallacious, or suspicious, as some of the peripatetics have declared them to be in autumn. That is when men feed more generously on fruit than at the other seasons. This same idea is stated in mystical form by the ancient prophets and poets, who say that empty and fallacious dreams lie hidden under the leaves that have fallen to the ground, because it is in autumn that the leaves fall from the trees. But really the natural heat which abounds in fresh fruit, and which, on account of its volatility, easily evaporates into the animal parts, as we see in new wine, has died out and dissolved long ago. As for drink, you shall have pure water from my fountain. The conditions are rather hard for me, said Panurge. I agree all the same. It's dear, but it's worth it. I do stipulate, however, that we have breakfast early tomorrow, immediately after this dreaming business. Furthermore, I commend myself to Homer's 2 gates, to Morpheus, to Ichilus, to Phantasos, and Phobeter. If they help me in my need, I'll build them a jolly altar, all made of the finest down. If I were in Laconia, in the temple of Ino between Oedalus and Thalamis, she would resolve my problem for me in my sleep with sound jovial dreams. But wouldn't it be a good thing, he asked Pantagruel a little later, if I were to put a few sprigs of laurel under my pillow? There is no need for that now, replied Pantagruel. It's a superstition, and all that has been written about it by Serapion, Ascalonides, Antiphon, Philochorus, Artemon, and Fulgentius Planciades is just as so much nonsense. I would say the same about the left shoulder of the crocodile and the chameleon, but for my respect for old Democritus, and the same about the Bactrian's stone called Eumetrides, the same about the horn of Ammon, which is the name given by the Ethiopians to a precious stone of gold color and in the shape of a ram's horn, like the horn of Jupiter Ammon. And they say that the dreams of those who wear it are as true and infallible as the divine oracles. This is not much unlike what Homer and Virgil write of as the 2 gates of sleep, to which you just commend yourself. One is of ivory, and through it some confused, fallacious, and uncertain dreams, just as through ivory, however thin it is, no one can possibly see, since its destiny and opacity prevent the penetration of the visual spirits and the reception of the visible emanations. The other is of horn, and through it some certain true and infallible dreams, such as through horn all objects are clearly and distinctly visible. Do you wish to infer, asked Friar John, that the dreams of horn cuckolds, such as Panurge will be, with God's help and his wife's, are always true and infallible? 14. Panurge's dream and its interpretation. At 7 o'clock the following morning, Panurge appeared before Pantagruel, in whose room were Epistemon, Friar John of the Hashies, Ponocrates, Eudemon, Carpelem, and others, to whom Pantagruel said as Panurge entered, Behold, the dreamer cometh. Those words, said Epistemon, were very costly in olden times. The sons of Jacob paid very dearly for them. I've done well at Billy's in the land of Nod, said Panurge at this. I've dreamed good and plenty, but I don't understand a word of it at all, except that I had a young and charming wife, a perfect beauty who treated me kindly and made as much fuss of me as if I were her darling fancy boy. Nobody could have been happier or gayer than I was. She flattered me, tickled me, tapped me, stroked me, kissed me, and cuddled me, and for a joke she made 2 pretty little horns to go above my forehead. I pointed out to her, jokingly too, that it was under my eyes that she ought to put them, so that I could see better what I wanted to butt. Then Momus would find no fault with her. He would not find anything to grumble about, the way he did about the position of the ox's horns. But the crazy girl took no notice of my remonstrance. She just pushed them a bit further in. and this did not hurt me in the least, which is a most remarkable thing. A little later, I seemed to have been turned into a little drum, and she into an owl. At this point, my sleep was broken, and I woke up with a start, quite vexed and puzzled and angry. Now, there's a fine dish full of dreams, and I hope you enjoy yourself with them. Explain them to me, if you please, to the best of your understanding. And now let's go to breakfast, Carpelin. It is clear to me, said Pantagruel, that if I have any skill in the art of divination by dreams, that your wife will not actually plant horns on your forehead, as the satyrs wear them, but she will not keep faith or conjugal loyalty with you. She will give herself to other men and make you a cuckold. This point is clearly set out by Artemidorus, and as I understand it. Also, there will be no actual metamorphosis into a small drum in your case, but she'll beat you like a small drum at a wedding. Nor will she be turned into an owl, but she'll rob you, as is the nature of the owl. See now how your dreams conform to the Virgilian lottery. You'll be cuckolded, you'll be beaten, and you'll be robbed. Then Friar John cried out and said, By God, he's speaking the truth. You'll be a cuckold and a proper one, I promise you. You'll have a fine pair of horns, ha ha ha. Our Master de Cornubus, God help you. Preach us 2 words of a sermon, and I'll collect alms about the parish. On the contrary, said Panurge, my dream prognosticates that in my marriage I shall receive good things, planted with the horn of abundance. You assert that they will be cedars' horns. Amen, amen. Fiat, fiatur ad differentiam papae. Panurge is burlesquing the papal form of assent. So be it till the Pope says no. Then I shall always have a stiff and tireless John Thomas, as the cedars have, and that's a gift which all desire, but which heaven grants to few. Consequently, I shall never be a cuckold, for the lack of this stiffness is the operative defect, the sole cause that makes husbands cuckolds. What is it that causes rogues to beg? It's because they haven't enough at home to fill their sacks. What makes wolves leave the forest? Shortage of meat. What makes women whores? You understand me, I'm sure. I appeal to the worshipful clerics, presidents of courts, counselors, lawyers, procurers, and other commentators on the venerable script De Frigidis et Maleficiatis, about the frigid and those rendered impotent by spells. Pardon me if I misunderstand you, but you seem to me patently to err in making horns the equivalent of cuckoldry. Diana wears them on her head in the shape of a fair crescent. Is she a cuckold for that? How the devil could she be a cuckold, since she was never married? Talk sense, if you please, or she may make your horns of the kind she made for Actaeon. The good Bacchus wears horns, also Pan, Jupiter, Ammon, and many others. Are they cuckolds? Can Juno be a whore? For that would follow by the figure of speech called metalepsis, just as calling a child a bastard or foundling in the presence of its father and mother amounts plainly and tacitly to calling the father a cuckold and his wife a whore. But let us speak less bodily. The horns my wife made for me are horns of abundance, and abundance of all goods. I'll stake my oath on it. As for the rest, I shall be as jolly as a little drum at a wedding, always booming and echoing, always rumbling and thundering. Believe me, this is where my luck will come in. My wife will be as neat and dainty as a pretty little owl. Who doesn't believe what I tell? May go to the giblet of hell. Noel, Noel, Noel. I note the last point that you mentioned, said Pantagruel, and I compare it with the first. At the beginning, you were totally immersed in the delights of your dream, but at the end you woke up with a start, quite vexed, and puzzled and angry. Of course, interrupted Panurge, for I hadn't had any dinner at all. Everything will go to ruin, continued Pantagruel. I foresee it. Be quite certain that all sleep which ends with a start, and leaves the sleeper vexed and angry, either signifies evil or portends evil. Signifies evil, that is to say, a malignant, pestilent, hidden disease lurking in the center of the body, which in sleep, which always strengthens the powers of incubation according to medical theory, would begin to declare itself and move towards the surface. At this unhappy stirring, the sleeper's rest would be broken, and the first organ of feeling be warned to sympathize and provide help, according to those proverbs that speak of stirring a hornet's nest, prodding la camarina, or waking a sleeping cat. portends evil, that is to say, when the soul by her activity in the matter of divination by dreams gives us to understand that some misfortune is destined and prepared, and that it will shortly take place. As an instance, there is Hecuba's dream and terrible awakening, and there is the dream of Eurydice, or Orpheus's wife, at the end of which, as Ennius declares, each woke up with a frightened start. Hecuba, on waking, saw her husband Priam and her children murdered and her country destroyed, and Eurydice, not long after her dream, perished miserably. Again, there is Aeneas, who dreamed that he was talking to the dead Hector, and suddenly woke up in a fright. And it was on that very night that Troy was sacked and burned. On another occasion, he dreamed that he saw his penates and domestic gods, and awoke terrified, to encounter next day a terrible storm at sea. And there is Turnus, who, on being incited by a fantastic vision of the infernal fury to start a war against Aeneas, woke up angry, and later, after a series of disasters, was slain by this same Aeneas. There are thousands more instances. When I tell you of Aeneas, note that Fabius Pictor says of him that he did nothing, embarked on no enterprise, and indeed that nothing ever happened to him, which he had not previously known and foreseen by divination of dreams. For these events there is no lack of reason. For if sleep and rest are the gift and special favor of the gods, as the philosophers maintain and the poets attest when he says, then came the hour when sleep, the heaven's gift, comes graciously to greet weary mankind. Such a gift cannot end in anger and irritation without some great misfortune being portended. Otherwise rest would not be rest, and a gift would not be a gift, since it would not come from the gods, our friends, but from the devils, our enemies. Remember the common proverb, the presence of enemies are not presents. Suppose the master of the house, sitting at his rich table with a good appetite and just beginning his meal, should be seen suddenly to jump up in alarm. Anyone who did not know the cause might well be astonished. Why did he do it? He had heard his servants cry fire, his maids cry thief, his children cry murder. He was compelled to leave the table and run up and bring help, to give orders. Indeed, I remember that the Kabbalists and Masoretes, interpreters of Holy Writ, in explaining how one can make sure of the genuineness of an angelic apparition, for often Satan's angels take the form of angels of light, say that the difference between the two lies is this, that when the good and consoling angel appears to man, he alarms him at first, but comforts him in the end, and leaves him happy and contented, whereas the wicked and corrupting angel rejoices a man at the beginning, but in the end leaves him troubled, angry, and perplexed. 15. Panurge's excuse and the explanation of the monastic Kabbalah in the manner of salt beef. The Lord preserve those who see but do not hear, said Panurge. I can see you very well, but I can't hear you at all, and I don't know what you're saying. The hungry stomach has no ears. I'm raging from a wild fury of hunger. I swear I am. I have been through a little too much, and it'll take more than Master Hocus Pocus to set me off dreaming again this year. To miss my supper entirely, devil take it. That's a pox of a business. Come, Friar John, to breakfast. When I've well and truly breakfasted, and my stomach is well and truly lined and foddered, at a pinch and in case of necessity, I'll do without my dinner, but to miss my supper? That's a pox of a business. Why, it's an error, a scandal in nature. Nature made the day for exercise, for work, and for each man to occupy himself in his business. And to help to do this more deftly, she provides us with a candle, the clear and joyful light of the sun. In the evening she begins to withdraw it from us, as much as to say to us, you are good, honest children. That's enough work. Night is coming, and now you ought to cease from your labors and take some refreshment. What you need is good bread, good wine, and good meat. After that you should enjoy yourselves a bit. Then lie down and rest, so as to be as fresh and joyful for your next day's labors. That is the way falconers work. When they have fed their birds, they don't make them fly with their gorges full, but let them digest on the perch. This was very well understood by that good Pope who first instituted fasts. He ordered that the fast should be kept till the hour of nuns, and that for the rest of the day a man should be free to feed. In the olden days few dined at noon except, you might say, the monk and canons, who really have no other occupation. Every day is a feast day for them. They carefully observe the monkish proverb, de missa ad mensem, from mass to table. It has never been their practice to wait for the coming of the abbot before getting down to their victuals. Of course, so long as they are eating, they have always been willing to wait for him as long as he liked, but not otherwise or under any other conditions. In the olden days, everybody supposed, except a few dozy fools, which is why supper is called coena, which means that it is common to all. You know that all right, Brother John. Come, my friend, let's have none of this devilish hanging about, but come along. My stomach's barking like a dog that's raging with hunger. Let's throw plenty of sops into his throat to keep him quiet, as the Sibyl did to Cerberus. You like your snacks at ungodly hours, but I prefer hare soup accompanied by a good slice of the ploughman salted in 9 lessons. I understand you, replied Friar John. That metaphor is drawn from the stock pot of the cloister. The ploughman is the ox that labors or has labored in 9 lessons, that is to say, cooked to a turn. For the good fathers of religion, by a certain cabalistic institution of the ancients, unwritten but passed from hand to hand, used in my time, on getting up for matins, to go through certain important preliminaries before entering the church. They shat in the shitteries, pissed in the pisseries, spat in the spitteries, coughed melodiously in the cougheries, and dreamed in the dreameries, so that they might bring nothing unclean to the divine service. Once they had done all this, they used to move devoutly to the holy chapel, for that, in their jargon, was the name they gave to the convent kitchen, and they devotedly saw to it that from that moment the beef was on the fire for the breakfast of the holy friars. Brethren in our Lord, often they lit the fire pot under the pot themselves. By that rule, when matins had 9 lessons, they had to get up earlier, and so their appetite and thirst increased as they bade their chant, more than when matins were pared down to 1 or 3 lessons only. By that rule, when matins had 9 lessons, they had to get up earlier, and so their appetite and thirst increased as they bade their chant, more than when matins were pared down to 1 or 3 lessons only. The earlier they arose, by the said Kabbalah, the earlier the beef was on the fire. The longer it was on, the better it was stewed. The better it was stewed, the tenderer it was. The less it wore down the teeth, the more it delighted the palate. The less it weighed on the stomach, the better it nourished the good monks, which was the sole purpose and prime aim of the founders, who remembered that far from eating to live, monks lived to eat, having no other possession in this world but their lives. Let us go, Panurge. Now, said Panurge, I've understood you, my velvety ball-bag, my cloistral and cabalistic and bollocky friend. I give up my share in the capital. The principal interest and charges I forego, and content myself only with the costs, since you have so eloquently expounded this remarkable chapter of the Kabbalah, culinary and monastic. Come, Carpelim, Brother John, my dear fellow, let's go. Good day to you all, my dear lords. I have dreamed enough for a drink. Let us go. Panurge had not spoken his last word when Epistemon cried out loudly, It's a most common and ordinary thing among men to realize, foresee, understand, and predict other men's misfortunes. But oh, what a rarity it is to realize, foresee, understand, and predict one's own. How wisely Aesop set this out in his fables, when he said that every man born into this world carries a wallet around his neck, in the front pocket of which are the faults and misfortunes of others, which are always before his eyes and in his mind, while in the pocket that hangs behind him are his own faults and misfortunes, which are never seen or realized except by those on whom the heavenly constellations smile. 16. Pantagruel advises Panurge to consult a Sibyl of Panzaust. A short time afterward, Pantagruel sent for Panurge and said to him, The love that I bear you, which is deepened with the long course of time, prompts me to think of your welfare and advantage. Listen to what I have thought. I have heard that at Panzaust, near Le Croulet, there is a very famous Sibyl, who predicts all future events. Take Epistemon for company. Go into her presence and hear what she has to say to you. But perhaps, said Epistemon, she is a Canidia. a sagana, a pythoness and sorceress. What gives me that idea is that the place has a bad name for sorceresses. There are said to be more there than ever there were in Thessaly. I shouldn't like to go there at all. The thing is wrong, and it's forbidden by the law of Moses. We are not Jews, said Pantagruel, and it is neither verified nor admitted that she is a sorceress. Postpone the sifting and winnowing of these matters till you return. How do you know that she isn't an 11th Sibyl, a second Cassandra? And even if she is no Sibyl, and does not deserve the name of Sibyl, what harm do you incur, Panurge, by consulting her in your perplexity, especially when you consider that she has the reputation for more wisdom and more understanding than is usual in her country or among her sex? What harm is there in gaining knowledge every single day, even from a sot, a pot, a fool, a stool, or an old slipper? You remember how Alexander the Great, after gaining his victory over King Darius at Arbela, once when surrounded by his princelings, refused to listen and afterward vainly repented of his refusal thousands and thousands of times. He was the victor in Persia, but so far away from his hereditary kingdom of Macedonia that to his great distress he could not devise any means of getting news from home, both because of the enormous distance between the countries and because of the impediment of broad rivers, the obstacles provided by deserts, and the barriers of mountain ranges. While he was brooding perplexedly on these troubles, which were not small ones, for his native kingdom might have been occupied, and a new king and new conquerors had been in possession long before he could have had warning to prevent it. While he was in brooding, as I said, there appeared before him a man from Sidonia, an experienced and intelligent merchant, but poor enough otherwise and unimpressive to look at, who announced and insisted that he had discovered a way by which Alexander's country could be informed of his Indian victories, and he could have news of conditions in Macedonia and Egypt in less than 5 days. But Alexander considered this claim so impossibly ridiculous that he would not even listen to the merchant or give him an audience. What would it have cost him to hear the man examine his claim? What harm or damage could he have incurred in ascertaining what the way was, what the proposition was that the man wanted to explain to him? There must be some reason why nature has made our ears open and placed no door or cover over them, as she has done over our eyes, our tongue, and the other openings in our bodies. Her purpose is, I believe, that all day and all night we shall continually be able to hear, and through our hearing perpetually to learn. For our hearing is the most educable of all our senses. Now that merchant might have been an angel, that is to say, a messenger sent from God, as Raphael was sent to Tobias. But Alexander was too ready to despise him, and regretted it for a very long time. You are right, said Epistemon, but you'll never persuade me that it is a very profitable thing to take counsel and advice from a woman, and from such a woman in such a country. I'm very lucky in women's counsel, said Panurge, and especially when they're old women. Thanks to their advice, I always produce an extra evacuation or two of the bowels. They're real pointer dogs, my friend, real manuals of the law. They're right to call them sage women, but it's my general custom to call them pre-sage women. Sage they are, because they're extremely handy at finding things out. But I say pre-sage because they foresee by divination and infallibly foretell all things to come. Sometimes I call them not harlots, but harbingers, as the Romans called Juno, for we always get salutary and useful warnings from them. On this point you should refer to Pythagoras, Socrates, Empedocles, and our master Ortuinus. Moreover, I have the very highest opinion of the ancient customs of the Germans, who set the counsel of old women at a price above that of the temple waits, and greatly revered it. Thanks to the advice and answers they received, they met with success and prosperity, in due proportion to the wisdom with which they followed their guidance, as witness old Aurenia and good mother Veleda in the days of Vespasian. Old age in women, I assure you, is always productive of Sibylline qualities. May God help us, may the power of God aid us, and let us go. Let us go. Goodbye, Friar John. I entrust my codpiece to you. Very well, said Epistemon. I'll follow you, but I give you warning that if I hear she resorts to lotteries or spells for her answers, I shall leave you at the door. You shall have no further company from me. 17. Panurge speaks to the Sibyl of Panzaust. Their journey took 3 days, and on the third the prophetess's dwelling was pointed out to them. It was on the brow of a mountain beneath a great broad chestnut tree, and they had no difficulty in entering her straw-thatched cottage, which was badly built, badly furnished, and filled with smoke. "No matter," said Epistemon. Heraclitus, a great Scotist and obscure philosopher, showed no astonishment on entering a house like this, but explained to his followers and disciples that the gods resided there just as much as in palaces full of delights. I believe that the cottage of the famous Hecale, in which she feasted the young Theseus, was like this. And like this, too, was the cottage of Hiereus of Eunopion, which Jupiter, Neptune, and Mercury were not ashamed to enter all together, and to take a meal and lodge there too, and to pay for their lodging they forged Orion from their piss-pot. They found the old woman in the chimney corner. "She is a real Sibyl," cried Epistemon, faithful to the living image of the one Homer described when he compared Ulysses to a Sibyl. The old woman was grim to look at, ill-dressed, ill-nourished, toothless, bleary-eyed, hunchbacked, snotty, and feeble. She was making a soup out of some green cabbage, a rind of yellow bacon, and an old marrow bone. "Odds my life," exclaimed Epistemon. "We've gone wrong badly. We shall never get an answer out of her because we haven't brought the golden bough." "I provided for that," replied Panurge. "I've got it here in my bag, in the shape of a golden ring and some fine, sparkling Charles crowns." Having said this, Panurge gravely saluted her and presented her with 6 smoked ox tongues, a large butter pot full of dumplings, a long bottle complete with beverage, and a Ramscott purse full of newly minted Charles crowns. Lastly, with a deep bow, he put on her ring finger a very fine gold ring, in which was a buxus toadstone magnificently set. Then, in a few brief words, he explained to her the purpose of his coming, begging her courteously to give him her advice and tell him what good fortune would come of his marriage enterprise. The old hag remained silent for some time, deep in thought and grinning like a dog. Then she sat down on the bottom of the tub, took 3 old spindles in her hands, turned and twisted them in her fingers in various ways, and keeping the sharpest in her hand and throwing the 2 others under a millet mortar. After that she took the reels of her spindle and turned them 9 times, lifting her hands off them at the 9th turn, but watching their movement and waiting till they were perfectly still. Then I saw her take off one of her clogs. We call them sabots, put her apron over her head as priests do their amice when about to sing the mass, and tie it under her throat with an ancient piece of striped and spotted cloth. Then, all muffled up, she took a long swig from the bottle, extracted 3 crowns from the Ramscott purse, put them in 3 walnut shells, and placed them on the bottom of a pot of feathers. Next she swept her broom 3 times across the hearth and threw half a faggot of briar and a branch of dry laurel on the fire, watching them burn in silence and noticing that in burning they made no crackling or noise of any kind. Then she gave a horrible cry, muttering some barbarous words with strange endings, which caused Panurge to say to Epistemon, "By all the powers, I'm trembling. I believe I'm bewitched. She doesn't talk Christian. Just look, she seems to me quite 3 foot taller than she was when she put her apron over her head. What does this waggling of the cheeks mean? What's the significance of this shoulder shrugging? Why does she mumble with her lips like an ape shelling shrimps? I've got a singing in my ears. I seem to hear Proserpine crying. The devils will soon break loose on this spot. Oh, the ugly beasts, let us run away. Holy snakes, I'm dying of fear. I don't like these devils. They worry me, and they're most unpleasant. Let's run away." "Goodbye, madame. Thank you very much for your kindness. I won't marry at all. I renounce the idea from this moment. It shall be in the future as it was in the past." With this he started to scamper out of the room, but the old hag was before him, still holding her spindle, and went out into a backyard beside her house, in which was a sycamore tree. She shook this tree 3 times, and on the 8 leaves which fell she summarily wrote some brief lines with her spindle. Then she threw them into the air and said, "Go and look for them if you like. Find them if you can. The fatal destiny of your marriage is written upon them." After saying this she retired into her den, but on the doorstep she hitched up her gown, petticoat, and smock to her armpits, and showed them her arse. "Odds tripe and onions," cried Panurge as he saw it. "Look, there's the Sibyl's cavern." Quickly she barred the door and was seen no more. They, however, ran after the leaves and picked them up, though it cost them great efforts, for the wind had scattered them among the bushes of the valley. Then, when they had arranged them in order, they found the following sentence in rhymes.
Of fame you're shelled, so even so, and she was child of you, oh no, your good end. Suck she will, and flay you, friend, but not all. 18. Pantagruel and Panurge find different explanations for the verses of the Sibyl of Panzoust. When they had collected the leaves, Epistemon and Panurge returned to Pantagruel's court, partly glad and partly vexed. Glad at their return, but vexed by the labors of the road, which they found rugged, stony, and ill-made. They presented a full report of their journey to Pantagruel, together with a description of the Sibyl, and then handed him the sycamore leaves, showing him the short lines of writing. When Pantagruel had read them all, he said to Panurge with a sigh, "You've done very well. The Sibyl's prophecy clearly confirms what was already stated by the Virgilian lottery, and also by your own dreams, that is, that you will be disgraced by your wife, that she'll make you a cuckold by giving herself to another and becoming pregnant by another, that she'll rob you of some good part of your possessions, and that she'll beat you, flaying and bruising some part of your body." "You understand as much about the exposition of modern prophecies," replied Panurge, "as a sow does of spiced lozenges. Don't be ruffled by what I say, but I feel rather cross. The truth is quite the opposite. Now, listen patiently. What the old woman means is that just as the bean isn't seen if it isn't shelled, so my virtue and perfections will never be famous unless I marry. How many times have I heard you say that judgeship and office reveal a man and bring to light what he has in his paunch? That is to say, that people only know for certain what a man is and what he is worth when he is called to the management of affairs. Before that, that is to say, when a man is a private citizen, no one knows for certain what he is. Would you maintain the contrary, that a good man's honor and renown depend on the rump of a whore? The second article says, my wife will be with child. Here, you see, is the first joy of marriage, but not of me. God save me, I can believe that. It'll be a pretty little boy, and that she'll be big with. I love him already most heartily. In fact, I'm quite silly about him. He'll be my little calfskin. There'll be no vexation in life, no trouble so great or so tiresome that I shan't throw it off the moment I see him and hear him prattle his childish prattle. Blessings on the old woman. I should like, really I should, to settle a good pension on her in Salmagundia. Not one of your pensions that's like a flighty bachelor of art, but a fixed one, as dependable as a grand professor in his chair. But to take the other view, would you have my wife carry me in her belly and conceive me, and bring me into the world? Would you have people say, Panurge is a second Bacchus? He has been born twice. He is Renee, born again, as Proteus was, once of Thetis, and a second time of the philosopher Apollonius his mother. And as the two Pelici were, beside the river Simithus in Sicily. His wife carried him in her womb. In him is repeated the ancient Palintosia of the Megarians and the Palingenesia of Democritus. What utter nonsense! Don't speak to me of it again. The third article says, my wife will suck my good end. I am quite agreeable. Of course you understand that this is the single-ended staff which hangs between my legs. I shall always keep it succulent and well supplied. She won't suck it in vain, I promise you. There will always be a little bit there, or rather more. Now you expound this line allegorically and interpret it to mean larceny and theft. I commend the exposition. The allegory pleases me, but not in your sense. It may be the sincere affection you feel for me that makes you see difficulties and reverses ahead. For the learned tell us that love is a strangely fearful thing, and that true love is never free from fear. But I really believe you to understand in your heart that theft, in this passage, as in so many others of the Latin and ancient writers, signifies the sweet fruit of passing love, which Venus would have to us pluck secretly and stealthily. Why so, I ask you? Because the little deed performed on the spur of the moment between closed doors, on the staircase behind the hangings, or on the sly, on an untied bundle of firewood, is more pleasing to the Cyprian goddess. And I say this without prejudice to higher authority, that when done in full daylight after the cynic's fashion, or under a precious canopy behind gold-embroidered curtains, perfunctorily and at long intervals, with a crimson silk fly-flap and a plume of Indian feathers to chase the flies from round about while the female is picking her teeth with a bit of straw that she will, in the meantime, have pulled out of the bottom of the mattress. Would you maintain, on the other hand, that by sucking me as one sucks oysters from their shells, or as the women of Cilicia
as Dioscorides tells us, suck the scarlet grain from the oak, she will be robbing me? A robber doesn't suck, but grabs. He doesn't swallow, but packs up, spirits away, and hey presto, it's gone. The fourth article says my wife will flay me, but not all. Oh, what a lovely line, and you interpret it to mean blows and bruises. That's prettily to the point, God bless you. But raise your spirits, I beg of you, from earthly thoughts to the high contemplation of nature's marvels. Admit and take the blame for the errors you have committed in perversely expounding the prophetic words of the divine Sibyl. Putting, but not admitting, or conceding, the case that my wife, at the instigation of our hellish enemy, should wish and attempt to play me a mean trick, to defame me, to make me a downright cuckold, to rob me and do me violence, still she would never be successful in her attempt. The reason which moves me to say this is based on my final point, which is drawn from the arcana of monastic pantheology. Brother Arthur Rumper told it me once, and it was on a Monday morning, as we were sharing a bushel of trotter pies, and it was raining. As I remember, God give him good weather. At the creation of the world, or a little after, the women conspired together to flay the men alive, for trying to lord it over them everywhere. And this resolution was formed, confirmed, and sworn to them, by the holy blood of Saint Bridget. But oh, the vain endeavors of women! Oh, the great frailty of the female sex! They began to flay the man, or peel him, as Catullus puts it, by the part that gives them most delight, to wit, the nervous and hollow member. That was more than 6,000 years ago, and yet up to the present they've only peeled its tip, for which reason, in pure despite, the Jews themselves snip it and cut it back in circumcision, preferring to be called clip-yards and circumcised infidels, rather than be flayed by women like the other peoples. My wife, not wishing to betray this common enterprise, will flay it for me. If it is not done already, I consent to that most willingly, but not to all, I assure you, my noble king. You give no explanation of the laurel branch, said Epistema, that burned without any noise or crackling while we looked on and she watched it, and exclaimed over it with hideous and frightening cries. That, you know, is a bad omen and a most fearful portent, as is attested by Propertius Tibullus, Porphyry, the subtle philosopher, Eustathius on Homer's Iliad, and others. Really, replied Panurge, you do drive some queer calves to market. As poets they were fools, and as philosophers, dreamers, as full of fine folly as their philosophy was. 19. Pantagruel speaks in praise of dumb men's counsel. After this reply, Pantagruel remained for some time silent, and seemed to be in deep thought. Then he said to Panurge, You're misled by the evil spirit, but listen. I have read that in the old days the truest and surest oracles were not those delivered in writing, or ordered by word of mouth. Very often, even those who were reckoned subtle and ingenious have been mistaken in them, both because of the ambiguities, equivocations, and obscurities in the words, and because of the brevity of the sentences. For which reason Apollo, the god of prophecy, was surnamed Loxias, the indirect. Those oracles that were declared by gestures and signs were looked upon as the truest and most dependable. This was the opinion of Heraclitus. This was the manner of Jupiter's prophecies at Ammon, and in this way Apollo prophesied among the Assyrians, which is why they depicted him with a long beard and clothed like an old person of sound judgment, not naked, young, and beardless, as the Greeks drew him. Let us use this method, and by signs, without resorting to speech, take counsel of some dumb person. I agree, replied Pantagruel. But, said Pantagruel, it would be as well if this dumb person had been deaf from birth and was dumb for this reason. For there is no dumb man so simple as one who has never had his hearing. What do you mean by that? Asked Panurge in reply. If it were true that no man ever spoke who had never heard speech, I would lead you by logical inference to a most absurd and paradoxical conclusion. But let it pass. You don't believe, then, what Herodotus wrote about the two children kept shut in a cottage by the command of Psammetichus, king of Egypt, and brought up in complete silence, who after a certain time pronounced the word Becus, which in Phrygian means bread? Not in the very least, replied Pantagruel. It's nonsense to say that we have a natural language. Languages arise from arbitrary conventions and the needs of peoples. Words, as the mathematicians say, have meaning not by nature but by choice. I don't make this statement without backing, for Bartolus, in his first book, On the Purpose of Language, recounts that in his time there was in Gubbio a certain Messernello de Gabrielis, who happened to have been born deaf. Nevertheless, he understood every Italian, however cryptically expressed himself, merely by the sight of his gestures and the movements of his lips. I have read also, in a learned and eloquent writer, the story of Tiridates, the king of Armenia in Nero's time. He visited Rome and was received with honor and solemnity and magnificent pomp. Since they wanted to retain his eternal friendship for the Senate and the Roman people, and there was nothing of importance in the city which was not shown and pointed out to him. On his departure, the emperor gave him exceedingly large presents and, in addition, allowed him to choose the thing in Rome that most pleased him, promising on his oath not to refuse him, whatever he might desire. All that he asked for was a certain comic actor, whom he had seen in the theater, where he had perfectly understood his meaning by his signs and gestures, although he had not understood what he said. The reason he gave was that there were under his rule people of different languages, to converse with whom he required several interpreters, but this man would be enough by himself, for he was so good at expressing himself by gestures that he seemed to speak with his fingers. Therefore, you must choose a dumb person who is deaf from birth, so that his gestures and signs may be naturally prophetic, not feigned, artificial, or affected. But it still remains undecided whether you wish to take this counsel from a man or a woman. I should like to take it from a woman, said Panurge, if I didn't fear two things. One is that whatever women see, they immediately connect it in the privacy of their own minds with the entry of the sacred Iphiphallus. Whatever gestures or signs one may make, however one may behave in their sight and presence, they always refer everything to the act of androgenation. So we should be deceived, for this woman would take all our signs for signs concupiscent. Do you remember what happened in Rome 260 years after the foundation of the city? A young Roman gentleman, meeting on Mount Caelian a Latin lady named Verona, who was deaf and dumb from birth, asked her with Italian gesticulations, but in ignorance of her deafness, what senator she had met on her way up. Not hearing what he said, she imagined him to be suggesting what was in her own thoughts, and what a young man naturally asks of a woman. Therefore, by signs, which in love-making are incomparably more delightful, efficacious, and precious than words, she drew him into her house and indicated to him that she was fond of the game. Finally, without uttering a word from their lips, they played some fine music with their thighs. The other thing that I fear is that she might make no response to our signs, but promptly fall on her back as an act consenting to our tacit demands. Or if she did make any signs to us in response to our propositions, they might be so senseless and stupid that we should ourselves realize her thoughts to be concupiscent. You remember what happened at Brignoles, how Sister Fatbum, the nun, was got with child by that lecherous young monk, Stiffcock, and how, when her pregnancy was discovered, she was cited by the abbess in full chapter and accused of incest. She defended herself by pleading that it had not been done with her consent, but that she had been overborne and raped by Brother Stiffcock. The abbess cut her short, crying, "You wicked creature, it was in the dormitory. Why didn't you shout out? We would all have come to your help." But the nun answered that she dared not shout in the dormitory because the dormitory is a place of perpetual silence. "But, you abandoned wretch," cried the abbess, "why didn't you make a sign to the sisters next to you in the room?" "I did signal to them with my bottom, which was the best I could do," said Fatbum, "but no one helped me." "But why didn't you come and tell me immediately, you hussy?" demanded the abbess, "and make a proper accusation against him? I should have done so, if the thing had happened to me, in order to prove my innocence." "You see," answered Fatbum, "after it happened, I was afraid of remaining in a state of sin and damnation, in case I was overtaken by sudden death. So I confessed to him before he went out of the room, and he enjoined me as a penitence not to tell anyone, and not ever to reveal it. It would have been too huge a sin, too great an abomination in the sight of God and his angels, to break the seals of confession. It might perhaps have caused the whole abbey to be burned by fire from heaven, and all of us to fall into the pit with Dathan and Abiram." "You won't make me laugh with that," said Pantagruel. "I am perfectly aware that the whole of monkdom is less afraid of transgressing God's commandments than of infringing their own provincial statutes. So let it be a man. Goat's Nose seems a suitable choice to me. He is deaf and dumb from birth. 20. Goat's Nose answers Panurge by signs. Goat's Nose was sent for and arrived the next day. On his arrival, Panurge gave him a fat calf, half a hog, 2 puncheons of wine, a load of wheat, and 30 francs in small change. Then he led him before Pantagruel, and in the presence of the gentleman of the bedchamber, he made him this sign. He took a longish yawn, and as he yawned, he made outside his mouth, with the thumb of his right hand, the figure of the Greek letter known as tau, which he frequently repeated. Then he raised his eyes to heaven and rolled them in his head like a great nanny goat in an abortion, coughing as he did so and heaving a deep sigh. This done, he pointed to his lack of a codpiece, and beneath his shirt he took his prodding tool in his fist and made it clatter melodiously between his thighs. He then bowed, bending his left knee, and remained with both his arms folded on his chest, one over the other. Goat's Nose looked at him curiously, then raised his left hand in the air, keeping all the fingers clenched, except the thumb and the index finger, the 2 nails of which he softly laid together. I understand what he means by that sign, said Pantagruel. He means marriage. According to the theory of Pythagoreans, that sign denotes marriage, and the number 30 as well. You will be married. Thank you very much, said Panurge, turning to Goat's Nose. Thank you, my little major domo, my galley master, my nigger driver, my constable, my sergeant of police. Then Goat's Nose raised his aforesaid left hand higher in the air than ever, extending all his 5 fingers and stretching them as wide as he could. Now, said Pantagruel, he is informing us more positively by giving us the sign of the quinary number. That means that you will certainly be married, and not only affianced, espoused, and married, but that furthermore you will cohabit and get well on with the job. Pythagoras called the quinary number the nuptial number, which indicates a wedding and the consummation of a marriage, being composed of the triad, which is the first odd and superfluous number, and of the dyad, which is the first even number. This signifies the male and female in copulation. Indeed, at Rome, in the olden times, they would light 5 wax candles on a wedding day, and it was not permissible to light more, even at the marriage of the wealthiest, or fewer, even at the marriage of the very poorest. Moreover, in the olden days, the pagans used to implore the assistance of 5 deities, or 1 god for 5 good offices, on behalf of those about to be married. Of Jupiter, the nuptial god, of Juno, who presides over the feast, of Venus the fair, of Pytho, the goddess of persuasion and eloquence, and of Diana, who presided over childbirth. Oh, the gentle Goat's Nose, cried Panurge. I shall give him a farm near Cannae and a windmill in Mirbeau. Hereupon the dumb man sneezed with a signal vehemence that shook his whole body and turned to the left. By the power of the wooden ox, cried Pantagruel, what's that? It's not a good sign. It denotes that your marriage will be inauspicious and unhappy. Sneezing, according to the doctrine of Terpsian, denotes the presence of the Socratic demon. A sneeze to the right signifies that a man may do whatever and go wherever he proposes with boldness and assurance. Everything will be good and fortunate from beginning to end, but a sneeze to the left means the contrary. You always see things at their worst, said Panurge. You are forever upsetting everything. Like the slave Davos. I don't believe a word of it. I never met that old wretch Terpsian, yet when he wasn't cheating. Cicero says something about it in his 2nd book of divinations all the time, said Pantagruel. When he turned toward Goat's Nose and made him this sign, he rolled up his eyelids, swiveled his jaws from left to right, and stuck his tongue halfway out of his mouth. This done, he opened the fingers of his left hand, with the exception of the middle one, which he kept perpendicularly on his palm, and placed it in this attitude where his codpiece should have been, keeping his right hand clenched except for the thumb, which he stuck straight back under his right armpit and settled above his arse in the place where the Arabs call al-Khatim, the sacrum. Then he quickly changed hands, holding his right in the attitude of his left and putting it in the position where his codpiece should have been, and in place of his right he clenched his left and placed it on the al-Khatim. This changing of hands he repeated 9 times. On the 9th he restored his eyelids to their natural position and did the same to his jaw and his tongue. Then he squinted at Goat's Nose, shaking his chops as apes do when they are happy, and as rabbits do when eating oats in the sheaf. Thereupon Goat's Nose raised his right hand in the air, wide open, putting the thumb up to the 3rd joint between the third joints of the middle and the right finger, and the ring finger, which he clenched rather lightly around his thumb, drawing the other joints of these fingers into his fist, and stretching his index and little fingers out straight. Then he placed his hands, thus clenched, on Panurge's navel, continually moving the aforesaid thumb and supporting his hand on his index and little finger, as on a pair of legs. In this posture he made his hand climb up Panurge's belly, stomach, chest, and neck in succession, to his chin, and put his aforesaid waggling thumb in Panurge's mouth. Then he rubbed his nose with it, and climbing further up to his eyes, made a show of putting them out with his thumb. This finally annoyed Panurge, who tried to withdraw and shake the dumb man off. But Goat's Nose went on touching him with his waggling thumb, first on his eyes, then on his forehead, and then just underneath his cap. Finally Panurge cried out, "By God, Master Fool, you'll get a beating if you don't leave me alone. Don't you go on annoying me, or my foot will pummel your rascally face till you look as if you were wearing a mask." "He's deaf," said Friar John. "He can't hear what you say, old cock. Give him the sign to show you mean a bang on the nose." "What the devil does Master Quack think he's up to?" cried Panurge. "He's nearly poached my eyes in melted butter. By God, if I may be forgiven, I'll give you a fine feast of punches, with double raps on the nose between the courses." With this he let Goat's Nose go, blowing him a salvo of farts. When the dumb man saw Panurge about to go, he got in front of him, held him back by force, and made him the following sign. He dropped his right arm to his full extent toward his knee, clenching all his fingers together and poking his thumb between his middle and index fingers. Then he rubbed the inside of the elbow of that right arm with his left hand, and little by little, as he rubbed it, he raised that arm in the air to the level of the elbow and higher. Then he suddenly dropped it to its former position, raising it and dropping it at intervals, and all the time exhibiting it to Panurge. In an absolute fury, Panurge raised his fist to give the dumb man a punch, but out of respect for Pantagruel's presence, he restrained himself. Then said Pantagruel, "If the sign annoys you, you'll be very much more annoyed by their fulfillment, for all the prophecies agree. The dumb man is demonstrating and foretelling that she will be married, cuckolded, beaten, and robbed." "The marriage I admit," said Panurge. "The rest I deny, and I beg you to be so kind as to believe me when I say that no man was ever so lucky in his wife and his horses as I am predestined to be." 21. Panurge takes counsel with an old French poet called Romina Groby. "I never expected to meet a man who stuck to his own ideas as obstinately as you do," said Pantagruel. "All the same, I think we should leave no stone unturned to resolve these doubts of yours. Listen to my idea. Swans, which are birds sacred to Apollo, never sing except when about to die. This is especially true on the Meander, a river in Phrygia, which I mention because Aelian and Alexander Mundius write that they have seen several die elsewhere, but never heard one sing at its death. A swan's song, therefore, is a certain presage of its approaching death, and it never dies unless previously it has sung. In the same way, poets, who are also under the protection of Apollo, upon the approach of death generally become prophets, and sing by Apollonine inspiration, foretelling things which are to come. I have often heard it said, besides, that any old man, when decrepit and near his end, can easily divine future events. In fact, I remember Aristophanes, in one of his comedies, calling all old people sibyls. For just as when we are on a jetty and see the sailors and passengers afar off in their ships on the open sea, we merely watch them in silence and pray fervently for their happy landing, but when they come near to harbor, we greet them by words and gestures, and congratulate them on having reached a safe haven, and come among us. So also angels, heroes, and good spirits, according to the doctrine of the Platonists, when they see human beings draw near to death, as into the surest and safest of harbors, the harbor of quiet and rest, out of the troubles and worries of this earth, greet them, comfort them, speak with them, and even then begin to teach them the art of divination. I will not quote to you the ancient examples of Isaac to Jacob, of Hector to Patroclus, of Hector to Achilles, of Polymnestor to Agamemnon and Hecuba, of the Rhodian celebrated by Posidonius of Calanus, the Indian to Alexander the Great, of Orodes to Mezentius, and others. I will call to your mind only that learned and valiant knight, Guillaume du Bellay, once Lord of Langley, who died on Mount Tarare on the 10th of January. In the critical year of his life, in our computation, the year 1543, by the Roman reckoning, the 3 or 4 hours before his decease, he spent predicting to us in vigorous language, with a calm and tranquil mind, events that we have since witnessed in part, and in part still expect to happen. At the actual time, however, these prophecies seem to us somewhat unlikely and strange, since there appeared to us to be no cause or present sign which heralded what he predicted. Now we have here, near La Ville aux Mers, one who is both old and a poet, Ramina Grobis, who married the great Sao for his second wife, who bore him the fair Syphilis. I have heard that he is in Articulo, and at the point of death. Go and visit him and hear his song. It may be that you'll hear what you desire from him, and that through him Apollo will resolve your doubt. I'm willing, said Panurge. Let's go to him, Epistemon, as fast as we can, for fear that death may forestall us. Will you come, Brother John? I'm willing, replied Friar John, perfectly willing, for love of you, old cock, for I love you with all my liver. They set out immediately, and when they arrived at the poetic abode, they found the good old man in his death agony, but cheerful in his looks, with a bright face and a shining eye. On saluting him, Panurge put on the ring finger of his left hand, as a free gift, a golden ring, in the bezel of which was a fine, large, oriental sapphire. Then, in imitation of Socrates, he offered him a beautiful white cock, which, when placed on his bed, immediately raised his head, flapped its wings with delight, and crowed loudly and lustily. After this, Panurge courteously asked the dying poet to give and expound his judgment on the problem of the proposed marriage. The good old man ordered ink, pen, and paper to be brought to him, which was promptly done. Then he wrote as follows: take her not, if you take her good enough. If you take her not in truth, all is perfection wrought. Gallop but a gentle pace, back go on and win the race. Take her, etc. Fast, but eat a double feast. What was remade, that unmake. What was unmade, that remake. Wish her life and wish her death. Take her, etc. This he handed to them and said, Go, my children, under the protection of the great God of heaven, and bother me no more about this matter, or about anything else. I have today, which is the last both of May and of me, with great labor and difficulty, driven out of my house a pack of ugly, unclean, pestilential beasts. Some were black, some piebald, some dun, some white, some ash-gray, and some speckled. They wouldn't leave me to die in peace, but by fraudulent prickings, harpyish clutchings, and waspish importunities, all forged in the smithy of I know not what insatiable greed, called me out of the sweet dream in which I was reposing. For just then I was contemplating and seeing, yes, even touching and tasting, the blessings and happiness that the good God has prepared for his faithful and elect, in the other life and the immortal state. Refrain from imitating them. Do not be like them. Bother me no more, and leave me in silence, I implore you. 22. Panurge defends the order of Friars Mendicant. As he came out of Ramnegrobis' room, Panurge said, as if thoroughly scared, By the power of God, I believe he's a heretic. Devil take me if he is not. He slanders the good mendicant fathers, Franciscan and Dominican, who are the two hemispheres of Christendom, on whose gyrognomic circumbilivaginations, as on two celovageous counterpendulums, the whole antonomatic matagrobalism of the Roman Church homocentrically revolves when it feels itself obfusculated by any heretical or erroneous claptrap. But what, in the name of all the devils, have these poor devils of Capuchins and Friars Minim done to him? Aren't they afflicted enough already? The miserable sods, aren't they already sufficiently fumed and perfumed with misery and disaster? The poor wretched offscourings of ichthyophagia. On your oath, brother John, is he in a state of salvation? Ichthyophagia is the country of fish eaters, a reference to the Friday fast. He's damned like a serpent, I swear he is, and he's on his way to 30,000 baskets full of devils, to slander those good and valiant pillars of the church. Do you call that poetic frenzy? I can't feel happy about him. He is a gross sinner and a blasphemer against the faith. I am greatly scandalized. I don't give a damn, said Friar John. They slander everybody, and if everybody slanders them, I can't pretend to be worried. Let's see what he has written. Panurge read the good old man's writing with attention. He's rambling, the poor boozer, he said, but forgive him, all the same. He must be near his end. Let's go and write his epitaph. The answer he gives us leaves me just about as wise as we were before we put the bread in the oven. Listen to me, Epistemon, old paunch. Don't you find him a bit too downright in his answers? He is, by God, a sophist, subtle, argumentative, and clever. I bet he's an apostate. By the belly of an ox, he takes good care not to make any mistake in his words. He only answers in disjunctives. He can't fail to tell the truth, since for such statements to be true, it's enough that one half's true. Oh, what a prattling cheat. By St. Laga of Brassier, there are still some of that breed left, are there? The great prophet Tiresias began with a warning of what kind before all his divinations, put in Epistemon. He said plainly to those who came to consult him, what I tell you either will take place or it will not. That is the method of all prudent prognosticators. Juno poked out both his eyes all the same, said Panurge. Yes, replied Epistemon, but that was out of spite because he had given a better opinion than she had on a certain question propounded by Jupiter. But, said Panurge, what devil possesses this master Raminogrobus, that he should, without purpose, reason, or excuse, so malign the poor blessed fathers, Dominicans, minorities, and minims? I'm greatly shocked by it, really I am. Indeed, I can't keep quiet on the subject. He has grievously sinned, and his soul will go bounding off to 30,000 pannier loads of devils. I don't understand you at all, answered Epistemon. You shock me yourself, and greatly, by perversely interpreting what the good poet said about beasts, black, dun, etc., as said about the mendicant friars. He does not, in my judgment, intend any such sophistical and fantastic allegory. He is speaking simply and straightforwardly of fleas, lice, food worms, flies, gnats, and other such beasts, of which some are black, others dun, others gray, others leather and tawny, but all tiresome, bothersome, and troublesome, not only to the sick, but to the strong and healthy men as well. It may be that he has ascarides, lumbricks, and tapeworms in his body. Perhaps he suffers, as is the common and usual thing in Egypt and the countries along the Red Sea, some pricking in his arms and legs from those speckled fleshworms that the Arabs call veins of Medina. You are to blame for reading any other explanation into his words. You wrong the good poet by detraction, and the friars by the imputation of baseness. In one's neighbor's case, one should always interpret everything in a good sense. You teach your grandmother, exclaimed Panurge. He's a heretic, by God, a full-blown heretic, I say, a scabby heretic, a heretic as fit for the fire as any little clockmaker. His soul will be sliding off shortly to 30,000 cartloads of devils. And do you know where? God's truth, my friend, right under Proserpina's close stool, in the very infernal pot into which she drops the fecal produce of her suppositories, on the left-hand side of the great cauldron, within 6 yards of Lucifer's claws, on the way to the black chamber of Demogorgon. Ho, the villain! 23. Panurge speaks in favor of returning to Raminogrobis. Let us return, said Panurge without stopping, and warn him to think of his salvation. Let us go to him in God's name and for God's sake. It will be a work of charity we shall be performing. If he is to lose his body and life, at least let him not damn his soul. We will induce him to repent of his sin, to implore pardon of the most holy fathers, absent as well as present. What's more, we'll put it in writing, so that they don't declare him a damned heretic. When he's dead, as the hobgoblins did in the case of the provost's wife at Orleans, he shall make them satisfaction for the insult by leaving bequests for extra snacks, and the recitation of obits, masses, and anniversaries, all to be enjoyed by the good holy fathers throughout the convents of this province. We will also provide that on the anniversary of his decease they shall all be served with 5-fold rations forever, and that the big leather bottle full of the best shall pass from rank to rank down their tables for the idling brothers the lay brothers, and the gorging brothers, as well as for the priests and clerks, for the novices as well as for the professed. In that way he will be quite sure to win God's pardon. But, no, what am I saying? I'm rambling, and I'm raving. Devil take me if I go. By the power of God, the room's full of devils already. I can hear them now tearing at one another and battling most devilishly, as to who shall gulp down the Ramina Grobidic soul, as to who shall carry it first to Master Lucifer, hot from the spit. Come away, I'm not going there. The devil take me if I go there. Who knows if they mightn't try a qui pro quo, and instead of Ramina Grobis, hook poor Panurge, now that he's free of his debts. Many times they've just bailed to catch me when I lived under the bankrupt saffron sign and owed all around. Come away, I'm not going there. Struth, I'm half dead of the very fever of fear. To find oneself among hungry devils, among factious devils, among devils at work, come away. I bet you that the same fear will prevent them all, Dominican, Franciscan, Carmelite, Capuchin, Theatine, and Minim, from reading his burial service, and very wise of them too. The more so since he has left them nothing in his will. Devil take me if I go. It's his own damage if he's damned. Why did he malign the good fathers of religion? Why did he chase them out of his room at the very hour when he was in most need of their aid, of their devout prayers and their holy admonitions? Why didn't he bequeath in his will at least some scraps, some stuffing, some belly lining for the poor folk who possess nothing but their lives in this world? Let anyone go there who will. The devil take me if I go. If I did go, the devil would carry me off. The pox on him. Come away. Brother John, would you like 30,000 cartloads of devils to carry you off this instant? If so, you must do 3 things. First, give me your purse, for the cross is an enemy to charms, and the same thing would happen to you as happened not long ago to John Dodon, the exciseman at Coudray, at the ford of Ved, when the soldiers broke the planks.